Linen has never forgotten that in the simulation, he found a city that seemed to be parasitized in the post-nuclear world. In that city, there were terrifying Zerg that even Linen at the time couldn't defeat in the simulation. Because when I saw these monsters in the simulation, it was after the nuclear explosion. Linen has been thinking, before that, did these Zerg appear? If it was a mutant monster that was created because of a nuclear explosion, was there a chance to get this group of bugs out of the way before? They can't just pop up because of a nuclear bomb and take over an entire city. Therefore, there must be clues beforehand, and it is even said that many powerful mutant Zerg have appeared. So, this time, Linen has been able to simulate the nuclear explosion, so he put the primary detection enemy on this group of Zerg. Then, in the simulation, I finally found the information about the city where the bug is located, impartially, just on his way to Qianlong Refuge. Take a little detour in the middle, and you can find that all over the place. Bugs KJ City. From the simulation point of view, these insects are not powerful at present, but the number is extremely terrifying. I am afraid that their true abilities will only be reflected after radiation. It turned out that Linen, who lacked the means of group attack, might still find it a little tricky. After all, the vitality of these bugs, to be honest, he was really afraid of a nuclear bomb, and as a result, the bugs not only did not die, but mutated and evolved directly on the spot. Isn't that so Dan? This is also the reason why Linen has not dealt with the mutant zombies that he had discovered and brought with him in City Y for the time being. From Linen's point of view, the group of mutant zombies is not as troublesome as this group of Zerg. After the nuclear explosion, within a short period of time, he could evolve into a Zerg that would confront him head-on, which was undoubtedly a more troublesome threat than zombies. Now there are fewer and fewer surviving people, and they have basically stayed in various shelters. As long as the shelters are safe, the number of these zombies will not increase. There may be billions of zombies in the world, but on the forum where Linen is, it is estimated that there are only a few 100 million left. The only thing to worry about is whether the mutants will cooperate with the mutant zombies to create some kind of moth. Linen looked at the information that he simulated to the back, and couldn't help sighing slightly. I really want to rest and can't rest. After hearing the information from Linen about these bugs, Liu Yao and the others couldn't say how worried they were, but they were still a little heavier. Originally, I thought life would get better soon, but no one knew what Linen saw in the future. He will not take the initiative to say, after all, some things, knowing too much, can only be a burden for them. However, it has not been 2 days before the corpse tide has receded. If we go now, we may bump into other corpse tide teams that are evacuating along the way. To be honest, if it wasn't for Linen who proposed, they would never have thought of leaving the shelter at this point. Let's go. Lao Yuan and I say hello. This time we go. There are a lot of things to do. Linen pondered for a moment, his mental power moved, and Jin Yu and the giant eagle that Linen had mutated with black light at first followed him with a flock of birds. This time, his purpose is not just to get those Zerg. The most important thing is to move the research institute first. At present, it is not easy to get a runway directly on the island where the transport planes can park, but it is not difficult in the shelter. Questionable. When the things are in place, Linen will strengthen the transport plane and take Zheng Li to Guizhou Island to build a tarmac. When the output of the medicine is enough for all the existing humans to use, the talents on Guizhou Island should also be ready. At that time, just before the arrival of the nuclear bomb, they will all be moved to Guizhou Island, and the base will be formed. We go on motorcycles. Linen still decided to ride a motorcycle. Although these mutant animals can carry people, with their weight, even a golden feather cannot fly very fast, not to mention that some of these giant eagles are not known for their endurance. At this moment, the motorcycles have been strengthened many times, and Linen has even considered letting them take off, much faster than ordinary flying animals. Collecting fuel from the city along the way, Linen now also has storage space, which basically won't delay things. Even if some roads are difficult to walk, temporarily let the flying animals come down and take them for a while. Without delay, Linen left as soon as he said it, greeted Yuan Long and others, and completed all the preparations almost an hour later. The motorcycle roared out, and the four started their journey again. However, this time on the road, whether it was in or Zhang Qingshui, they suddenly felt a sense of confidence. Linen, needless to say, he is naturally very confident in his own strength and the future he sees. Zhang Qingshui and the others, after experiencing the corpse tide, suddenly realized that even if there is a new crisis in front of them, they still have enough courage to face difficulties and overcome them. As the strength of several people became stronger, even Yin Xiaoxiao didn't need to have the feeling of needing to take care of her as before. The motorcycles of several people were galloping on the empty road like a black phantom, and their outstanding mental strength made them hardly need to rest. After working day and night, on October 7th, we arrived at KJ City. As seen in Lin An's simulation, the closer you get to the whole city, the more silent it becomes. Without Lin An taking the initiative to say be careful, the girls consciously stopped their motorcycles. After running for several days in a row, everyone is not in their best state at this moment. Rest for 3 hours, then go in. Lin An observed for a moment and made a decision. The girls breathed a sigh of relief. Yin Xiaoxiao was about to conjure up something. Lin An waved his hand, and 3 neatly arranged small tents appeared beside him. You have a new ability. Several girls were stunned. In the past few days, Lin An has not shown them his new abilities yet. He looked at them with a smile. How is it? Unexpectedly, Yin Xiaoxiao suddenly became nervous. Is it the same ability as me? Lin An was stunned for a moment, then laughed. Of course not. I didn't make this randomly. It's just a storage space. Xiao Zhang. You've read so many fairy tales, you should know what it is. Zhang Qingshui suddenly murmured. No wonder. I said that this time you don't seem to be allowed to bring anything. I thought you planned to let Xiaoxiao change out on the road. Duan Xiaoxiao breathed a sigh of relief, but saw Lin An lower his head playfully. You are not worried that I am as capable as you, so I don't need you, right? How could it be? She hurriedly said, and then looked down at her toes a little embarrassedly. That's right, I'm worried that I won't be able to help you. Lin An rubbed her head and smiled. You have already helped me a lot when you were by my side. Looking at the erratic eyes of the other 2 girls, he added, you are both HMPH, rest, sleepy. Lu Yao made a face, turned his head and got into the tent and fell asleep. Yin Xiaoxiao and Zhang Qingshui also entered a tent. Lin An just sat on the motorcycle and closed his eyes. The mutant animals take turns flying in the air to be alert and take turns to rest. 3 hours later, Lin An got up. There was a faint golden light in his eyes. I have already seen some unusual traces in the distance. Under Lin An's vision, all obstacles seemed to be blurred. His eyes were like cameras with infinite pixels, zooming in and zooming in at will, passing through the buildings and the ground, and saw some traces of insect activity. These bugs are much smaller in size than Lin An's swarm, but far more numerous and denser than the swarm. Looking at Lin An's eyes, these insects seem to have nothing to eat. Some, lost, mutant animals, plants, and even some insects that look slightly different from them are their food. Most of them have thick carapaces, like unicorns, but they also have various strange-shaped mouthparts. The horns on the top of the head are not like unicorns only used for collision, but similar to some kind of limbs that can dig the ground. Lin An looked down with his eyesight, and the whole city almost turned into a sieve. Unlike the swarms of rats, which are just digging holes for movement, these worms seem to be building roads. The complex caves extend in all directions, and countless worms come and go, and even the deepest place has dug more than 30 meters underground. Outrageous. Lin An carefully observed for a while, and finally determined that the female insects in these swarms must exist in the city center. He glanced across the ground and stared at a bug. At this moment, the worm was holding the remnants of an unknown animal, like an ant returning the food to its nest, consigning the food. In addition, other insects are similar. In addition to eating by themselves, they will also take the initiative to carry food, like ants, following the complex underground route and return to the city center. The line of sight just followed the insect and continued to look into the city, and a huge nest appeared in front of him. It was a giant silkworm chrysalis-like monster entrenched in a high-rise building. It almost smashed through the ceiling of 6 or 7 floors. It was like a huge spider egg, rooted in the soil below. Lin An's eyes saw that it was deeply buried. The place in the earth is like a huge room. Countless flesh and blood are brewing worm eggs, and the existence of blood vessels can directly suck the food carried by the worms. Lin An looked over and over several times, and in the center of the huge nest, he saw a huge 2-story female worm. This female worm looks chubby, but it's all white, always giving people a disgusting, maggot-like, sense of sight. It seems that Lin An's gaze caught its attention. The female worm in the nest turned her head suspiciously, swept away with mental force, trying to find who was observing herself, but Lin An's celestial eyesight was not using a kind of psychological observation, but a real look. The female worm finds nothing. Lin An withdrew his gaze in order to avoid stunning the snake, and after a moment of contemplation, he estimated the distance. Go together. All you need to do is cover me while I cast spells. Lin An briefly explained the situation. A few girls were stunned when they heard it. Spellcasting? What new ability is this? Lu Yao said curiously, but Zhang Qingshui was thoughtful. She asked suddenly, you made all the explosions around the shelter before? Lin nodded with a smile. I'll give you a surprise for a while, but it's a pity that I can only use these abilities in a simple way. When I return to Lonely Island after this busy work, I will study for a while, and then I will point to maybe there are new ways to help you progress. Surprise enough. Sometimes, I'm a little scared. Lu Yao couldn't help but complain. She looked at Lin and shook her head again and again. Are you really the same kind as us? How can new abilities come out all the time? Lin couldn't help laughing, stretched out his hand and flicked her forehead. In short, when I'm casting spells, I need to concentrate for about 10 seconds. You are responsible for cleaning up the miscellaneous soldiers, and don't let them disturb me. It only takes about 10 minutes to fly from here to the position of the female worm, at my speed, with you. The process of this action is very short and not too difficult. The only thing that needs to be careful is the accidental injury or the mental shock that the female insect may have. If I say run, don't think about anything, just run with all your strength. Xiao Zhang, you will be responsible for taking them with you. Lin warned him a few more words, and when he saw that the girls understood what he meant, he waved his wings. The black light tail held them up, and the motorcycles were all stored in the storage space. With a wave of their wings, they broke through the airflow and flew towards the city. There seemed to be a black meteor in the sky, heading straight for the tall building where the female insect was. 10 minutes later, Lin stopped his wings. At this moment, a dense pile of insects suddenly appeared on the ground. Those insects swarmed, but he was helpless for a while in the air. Until some insects suddenly cracked the carapace, the transparent insect wings vibrated rapidly and flew to the sky. Go. Lin made an immediate decision and decided not to approach. Or it was the mother bug's excellent mental strength that made it aware of the arrival of the crisis, and the response of these bugs was obviously much faster than Lin expected. But, for Lin, time is ample enough. He landed in the lair to the vicinity of 100 meters, his eyes radiated a faint golden light, and the thoughts in his mind quickly turned. Everything was slowing down, and the flutter of every bug's flight was clearly visible in his eyes. Zhang Qingshui and the three of them quickly began to enter the fighting state the moment he said he would do something. However, his speed of thinking was constantly accelerating, his spiritual power became more and more acute, and the surrounding aura began to resonate with the aura in his body. The aura of countless red, cyan, and orange rays flickered, constantly converging in Lin's hands. Countless swarms of insects flew towards him, but they couldn't get close at all. Zhang Qingshui stretched out her hand, her eyes seemed to emit a faint glow, she gritted her teeth and stretched out her palm, as if an invisible circular barrier appeared in the air. These barriers blocked the swarm 10 meters away from Lin. And Lu Yao just let out a low voice, and an ice wall rose into the air, catching her and Yin Xiaoxiao in midair. The two stepped on the ice wall. Lu Yao just spread her hands. Countless clearly visible dark blue ice swept out, and before countless insects approached, they turned into ice sculptures and fell to the ground, shattering the ground. Yin Xiaoxiao raised her hand, temporary realization. The next moment, a rather sci-fi flamethrower appeared out of thin air in her hands. She depressed the switch and pressed the button. Boom. Huge flames spurted out, and the terrifying power almost instantly filled the air with a strange smell of carbon and meat. This is exactly the biggest progress Yin Xiaoxiao has made in the development of her own abilities during this period of time. Through temporary manifestation, the mental power that needs to be consumed is reduced, and various weapons or tools with huge lethality can be manifested at the fastest speed. These things transformed by her have a time limit and generally cannot last for a few minutes. But for Yin Xiaoxiao, it is enough to use less mental power to exchange for a powerful weapon that can be used for a few minutes when needed. Zhang Qingshui is also not to be outdone. Her ability is naturally not just the development of psychic power, in fact, her ability is more prominent in spiritual power. At this moment, she not only propped up the barrier to protect a few people, but also gritted her teeth and sent out a mental shockwave. These shockwaves destroyed the brains of countless flying insects almost instantaneously, and even almost interrupted the female insect's mental control over them. These flying insects staggered down, like snowflakes, but some of them were alive and did not die, but fell into complete madness and began to fight against the same kind. The fighting power displayed by the girls in just a few seconds almost made the overwhelming bugs completely unable to fight back. And Lin just let the black light keep his levitating movements, and his eyes were extremely focused on the distance. The aura gathered in his hand began to fly away into the distance, and countless auras converged in the air, almost turning into a clearly visible three-color streamer. Red, cyan, and orange, the three colors were continuously mixed, becoming more and more conspicuous at the same time, and finally, in front of the tall building, they were completely integrated. Don't wait for the girls to see what's going on. Lin En's expression changed, and without saying a word, he lowered his head and shook his wings. Under the somewhat bewildered expressions of the girls, he directly rolled them all up in black light. The black light vibrated wildly, and he actually chose to run away without looking back at this moment. What's wrong? Lu Yao asked anxiously. Lin En just pretended to be calm. Real men never look back at the explosion. Okay. The girls turned their heads blankly at his words. Next moment, they knew why Lin En took them away in such a hurry. Just looking behind him, there was originally a high-rise building, but a spark suddenly appeared at this moment. First, a group of small, vortex-like three-color streamers were mixed together, as if they collided and rubbed some firelight. The next moment, these brilliance quickly smudged like ink. The cyan light exploded into a cyan tornado in an instant, and almost rolled countless insects directly into the sky. In the blink of an eye, the red streamer spread out into the sky like pillar of fire, and the entire tornado devoured the entire tall building in an instant. After the whine of countless flying insects, there was a sharp scream full of hatred and anger from the building. Lin En didn't look back, her wings fluttered wildly. Just because the next moment, an orange bright spot suddenly appeared. In the blink of an eye, this orange-yellow bright spot was like a flammable accelerant bursting open, and for a while, the original firelight suddenly changed to orange, and the faster it turned, the brighter the color. In just one breath, it changed from orange to golden, and with another breath, it changed from golden to dazzling white. Then, there is an explosion. The huge ball of light grew bigger from a young age, and for a time, it seemed that a sun was born in the building with the nest. The dazzling white light ripped apart everything, and for a while, even if it was still broad daylight, it made the surroundings as dim as night in an instant. It was the light and airwaves that appeared first, causing Lin En and the three girls to be swept up in the air and almost deviated from the direction. The moment he realized the explosion was coming, Lin En made a decisive decision, and a black light spread out from behind him, as if it turned into a shield, covering all four of them. Sure enough, the huge impact that followed was the big one. The gravel, high temperature, and the impact caused by the real explosion, and then, was the sound. Boom. It was like thunder, but it exploded even more. After a loud bang, countless tall buildings collapsed, shards of glass came out, and the ground trembled. Lin En and the others were covered by the black light, and they could only hear the black light condensed. The shield made a dense explosion. After the sound ended, Lin En released the black light. Seeing the scene behind him, he breathed a sigh of relief, and the girls were a little sluggish for a while. Luckily it ran fast. If the fool is still within 100 meters, I am afraid that this time I will be injured by myself. Lin En. What is this? Lu Yao's scalp felt a little numb, and a huge deep pit in the distance was clearly visible in the dust. The original high-rise building had disappeared, and even the wreckage could not be seen. Arrive. What kind of explosion can make such a big building? No, not just one building. Even all the surrounding buildings and streets, even the traces disappear? It's as if nothing ever existed in that place. Moreover, the shock wave was so violent, but the core of the explosion was tightly bound within 100 meters. The surrounding damage is at most caused by shock waves. So, looking over there at the moment, everything seems a little weird. Some buildings seem to have been whistled, and there are only a few edges left, and the unevenness symbolizes this place. Whatever existed. Lin En shook his head and said, I didn't expect it to be so strong. This time, he not only used the cyan wind aura and fire aura as the casting material, but most importantly, he also mixed in a yang aura that he had only figured out not long ago. In the previous small-scale experiments, I only knew that adding this spiritual energy would make the explosion more powerful. To be precise, the heat of the explosion point inside increased in a large range, just like turning that small area into the sun in an instant. In exchange for the introduction in Hokage, Lin En is equivalent to transforming the simple windfire ninja method into burning power, transforming the simple fire and explosion damage into the more powerful and more solid dissolution damage. But he really didn't expect that when he tried to combine the yang spiritual qi, once it reached a certain amount, it would instantly cause a qualitative change, almost so powerful that he could not control it, so he simply let go and let the three spiritual qi go freely. Traction works. The result, of course, is gratifying, or rather, amazing. The nest in front of him has long since disappeared, and even the worms in the ground have completely disappeared. The high temperature not only melted the ground, but the terrifying temperature also penetrated into the ground, causing the insects under 30 meters to be roasted instantly. Lin felt hot all over after taking back the black light. If it weren't for the fact that the intensity of the black light itself is sufficient, and it also has strong heat resistance, this time, it might have been injured due to burns. Even so, Lin felt that his blood was really boiling. After those black lights returned to their cellular form, they failed to cool down for a long time. You didn't expect it. Lu Yao was stunned, turned his head over, and found that Lin was smoking at the moment. Are you on fire? Frost appeared on Lu Yao's hands subconsciously. Lin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What are you thinking? I'm just expelling heat. What kind of robot are you? Lu Yao was amazed. Yin Xiaoxiao silently handed a can of ice coke. Look at Xiaoxiao. Lin glanced at Lu Yao with disdainful eyes, smiled Mimi and took the coke, gulping a few sips. Don't say it, it seemed to cool down. Then what shall we do next? Zhang Qingshui was the first to recover. With a wave of her hand, several small black swords flew out, stabbing some insects that were running around after losing control in the distance. Lin stomped his feet, the black light flowed like mercury, and the next moment exploded countless threads, trampling to death some bugs hidden in the ground that were not within the blast range. No need to do anything, I'll pay more attention when I come back. If these worms still have female worms, I will take advantage of the new female worm's weak mental strength and put it away. Oh, even non-human beings are not spared. Lu Yao Nuo lost. Zhang Qingshui couldn't hold back and knocked Lin on the forehead. Be serious. Lu Yao giggled. Just kidding, don't you feel nervous? That explosion looks so scary. Zhang Qingshui shook his head. There's nothing to be nervous about, I'm more worried about you than this. She stared at Lu Yao meaningfully, and her tone was full of warning. Before leaving this time, Zheng Li seems to want to come out with him, right? Lu Yao's face changed slightly, glanced at Lin, coughed twice, suddenly hugged his arm, and said pitifully, Brother Lin, I'm joking. Huh. Lin made a disgusting voice, and after a few laughs, they were ready to continue on the road. A huge crisis seems to have ended before it even started. But when Lin was about to leave, he raised his head with deep eyes, looked at the sky, and then looked at the ground. I just hope that some terrible guesses that have been circling in my heart are his wrong guesses. The process of going to Qianlong base was smoother than Lin thought. Perhaps it is because several large shelters have survived the corpse tide in their own way. Although some shelters suffered heavy casualties, in any case, in this battle between zombies and humans, humans temporarily gained the upper hand. Therefore, along the way, whether it is mutants or zombies, the number is pitiful. The rest of the mutant animals also failed to see the special existence that led the various mutant animals alone, like the Lion King. Most of them are small groups or large groups, and the groups are divided according to species, which has little influence on Lin et al. After arriving near the Qianlong refuge, the surrounding scene made Lin and his party hold their breath. There are corpses everywhere. Zombies, mutant animals, and even humans. Craters and scars from various impacts, broken building. There was pitch black everywhere, and blood clotted. Lin could vaguely hear the howls of some monsters. When the motorcycle went deep, a towering fortress appeared in front of him. Unlike the simple high wall on Lin's side, perhaps due to the difficulty of construction, Qianlong's fortifications began to be prepared in layers almost dozens of kilometers away from the shelter. One by one, bunkers and gun towers, ravines, you can imagine how they fought. One after another line of defense tried their best, and countless soldiers used blood to forge the line of defense, and the corpses in one place. I really don't know how they survived this catastrophe. Perhaps, this is the trajectory of the original story that should have happened. Only Lin's dawning sanctuary can do that without human life. Relying on various evolutionaries, plants and animals, it has almost achieved the feat of zero death. Hey, the lives of mutant animals and plants Lin don't count. I hope that the Qianlong refuge is still able to operate normally at this moment. Lin sincerely expects it. Not too close, about a dozen kilometers away from the shelter, Lin and his party were left behind by the sentry. Where did you guys come from? The tired, indifferent soldier put his finger near the trigger. Lin said calmly, I came from Dawning Sanctuary, my name is Lin. The soldier obviously learned the name in advance, and his attitude softened. He saluted and said, please wait a moment, we need to confirm. Lin naturally had nothing to do with it. He waited for a while, and there seemed to be an internal phone inside. After several consecutive calls were forwarded, he finally confirmed the news. The soldier came out of the simple post and said, "Please follow the route here. We still have mines that haven't been triggered. It may be dangerous to go astray." The soldier pointed to the distance, and Linen saw a small flag that could be planted on the road. "Thank you," Linen nodded. The soldier did not intend to chat, seemed a little lack of interest. The motorcycle slowed down and drove in. Lu Yao waited to walk away, and whispered, "Their situation seems to be worse than I thought." "I don't know how many people died." Zhang Qingshui sighed. She turned her head, looked at Linen, and said softly, "Linen, I think you are more and more amazing." "I know." Linen smiled and winked at her. Yin Xiaoxiao followed at the end, and her mood also looked a little depressed. "I don't know if we can help them." Linen thoughtfully looked left and right, and then said, "Don't worry, it will all get better." In just one sentence, even Linen didn't say what to do. The girls were obviously in high spirits, and seemed to be full of fighting spirit. Especially Lu Yao. This guy asked instinctively, "What do we need to do?" Just like if Linen wants to do it, it must be done. "Take your time." Linen couldn't help laughing and crying. Doesn't he have to look at the dishes? He doesn't know what is the biggest difficulty for others at the moment. How can he know what to do? However, there is still confidence. His abilities are very comprehensive at present. No matter what is lacking in this sanctuary, he has corresponding solutions. The motorcycle drove into the shelter, and the further you went, the more complex blocking facilities you could see. Some soldiers were still dragging some corpses out at the moment. Linen carefully observed that they were mostly zombies, but there were still some, is human. After Linen made a quick judgment, he was not optimistic about the situation in the shelter. "I am afraid that there are not enough medical facilities, and many human beings died because of their serious injuries and lack of effective treatment." Yin Xiaoxiao looked uncomfortable and followed Linen closely without saying a word. Lu Yao also fell silent, thinking of what he saw in the dawning refuge. People were full of energy and full of hope for the future. Zhang Qingshui seemed the most calm. Like Linen, she judged the current situation, and then gave her advice. "When you get to the place, let Xiaoxiao go and have a look. Her ability should be able to help a lot." "Well, we'll stay for at least a day or two, don't worry." After Linen finished speaking, he noticed that there was a man in a white coat in the distance, followed by several soldiers, coming from a distance in a jeep. Without self-introduction, Linen was able to match the name of a familiar person in his mind from the man's indifferent to expressionless appearance. Besides Guan Hong, the head of the research institute, who else could it be? He drove closer, rolled down the car window, and did not chatter, but went straight to the subject. "Linen, get in my car. The institute is not in the shelter." "Okay." Linen agreed directly. After getting out of the car, a soldier got out of Guan Hong's car and was about to take over his motorcycle, but Linen just waved his hand, and he put the motorcycle into the storage space. The ability revealed by this amazing glance made many people look at him, but Guan Hong, who was sitting in the co-pilot position, still kept his expression calm. He pushed the glasses on his nose. "Do you want to be with your companions behind you? Let them go to the shelter first." Linen glanced at Lu Yao and the others. "Okay. Xiaoma, go and receive him." After Zheng Hong nodded, the soldiers in the back seat took the initiative to show Lu Yao and the others the way. Linen directly opened the back seat of the jeep and sat in. As soon as he sat down, Guan Hong said in a calm tone, "You came just in time, and we are just about to start the last meeting on your proposal. Even though I hate this kind of waste of time, there is no way I can do it. There are a lot of things here that I can't decide alone." He seemed to just explain the situation, but Linen understood it. "I'm afraid things have turned upside down. Maybe some people are not optimistic, or say they are unwilling to move the research institute. After all, for the Qianlong refuge, the biggest reliance or hope at present may be the research institute. This is undoubtedly weakening their own power. Who is not afraid of death?" Linen smiled, and then looked relaxed. "That's fine, let everyone decide together. In general, if I want to take the institute away, I have to take advantage of it, and I have to pay something. No need to worry." After Linen finished speaking, Guan Hong, who was sitting in front of him, just smiled lightly. "I know. The two of them are so close to each other that they don't need to say much." The car turned around outside the shelter, and Linen could only see some rough temporary buildings, and some were even just outlines, giving him the feeling that he was in a slum in Africa. After bypassing the shelter, the jeep drove up the road, and soon saw a small building that looked like a fortress. Judging from the style, it looked a bit like the entrance to an underground bomb shelter. The research institute is underground. Guan Hong pushed on his glasses, and when the car was in place, he opened the door. After getting out of the car, he stretched out his hand to Lin and shook it lightly. It's up to you. Lin nodded heavily. Okay. The underground research room is brightly lit. Lin believes that the research room established in the air raid shelter was temporarily transformed, so the road leading to the underground and the surrounding walls still have a very old feeling. But when he went deeper, he realized that it didn't seem to be the same as what he thought. This air raid shelter, or the research room itself, seems to have not been established after the end of the world. Don't you think this laboratory was built after the apocalypse? Guan Hong, who was leading the way, put his hands in his pockets, and his white coat looked clean. Lin nodded. He didn't react because he guessed what he was thinking. He just asked curiously, what was this place used for? Before, this was the secret medicine research room, which was responsible for researching some secret medicines that were inconvenient for the public to discover. Guan Hong's voice was calm, and after a pause, he said, as you guessed, what we have been doing is research on genetic evolution and mutation. It can be said that the occurrence of this Doomsday is a professional counterpart. Guan Hong seems to want to tell a humorous story, but the effect is not very good. Lin was even more curious. That is to say, related research was already being done here before the end of the world. Are there any research results? Unfortunately, until the end of the day, our research here has not made any progress. Guan Hong shrugged as he spoke, stopped, and looked at the wall beside him. In front of that wall stood two soldiers with guns. Guan Hong nodded to them, took out a card similar to a pass from the white coat, and brushed it against the wall. The next moment, the originally modeled wall suddenly separated. It perfectly matches Lin's expectations for the secret lab. Isn't that what it's all about in the movies? An elevator appeared. Guan Hong stepped in, and walked into the elevator side by side with Lin. He glanced at Lin. It was the first time the two formally looked at each other. You also know that the so-called genetic research, especially the optimization and mutation of genes, has always been controversial, especially the purpose of our research institute is more incredible than the so-called front-end research. Accurately speaking, the main research goals of our institute in the past, in addition to the common changes in genetic history, and optimization of genetic genes, the most important thing is gene optimization. Of course, saying gene optimization is actually trying to develop a kind of superhuman that can break through the current genetic constraints and become a Superman or a captain of a certain country. Of course, there will also be some inconvenient studies. Guan Hong did not press the button. In fact, when the two entered the elevator, the camera on the elevator turned slightly to lock his face. After not knowing whether it was a manual or eye judgment, the elevator began to descend automatically. At present, the purpose of this institute is to study the genes of zombies, mutant animals, mutants, and evolutionaries. The result of our study, you already know, is to simplify the pharmacy. Of course, we have a different name for it, you can call him X1. Guan Hong introduced it again and again. In a few words, the elevator sank and stopped. After opening it again, a clean research room with a very obvious sense of technology appeared in front of him. Lin looked left and right, his eyes glowed with golden light, and after reading the whole institute, he couldn't help sighing. It's really amazing. This underground research institute looks like the umbrella company in Resident Evil, with white walls and spotless glass everywhere. Apart from the soldiers standing still, the people who came and went were all hurried researchers in white coats. I don't know if I should be lucky or not. Since the aspect of our research is relatively dangerous, the corresponding crisis management equipment can be said to be very perfect. When the apocalypse came, we effectively isolated our colleagues who mutated into zombies, and kept our research team as much as possible. Less than 20% of the people who died have read the crisis at the very beginning. The water, electricity and other systems also operate completely independently, and the reserves are also very complete, which allows us to have spare energy to manage and build a shelter that can accommodate many people. When Guan Hong communicated with Lin, the white coats around him nodded to him one after another, and at the same time, they gave Lin a curious look. Lin nodded thoughtfully. Let's go, the conference room is here. Your request can be made during the meeting. Guan Hong once again hinted to Lin that unlike others, he actually doesn't care about his own safety. He is a real ideal master. When the end of the day is coming, he cares more about how to preserve the so-called human power as much as possible than his own safety and how to make the end of the end. But for other people, especially some people who are already a little scared, rather than facing the doomsday, perhaps, the only way to survive is to be able to maintain the research institute and stick to it as much as possible. In fact, their ideas are not necessarily nonsense. Only the elites among thousands of human beings are retained, and the research institute is transformed into a refuge. With the scientific research strength and material reserves of the research institute, it may not be possible to survive in the ground for 30 or 50 years. Not even a nuclear bomb. After all, everyone has now developed the evolutionary medicine, so there is no need to worry about the so-called radiation. The vitality is extremely strong, and there are various special abilities. Just thinking about it, isn't it all a life? Going to Linen? No kidding, who is he? A prophet. Can he guarantee that we won't die, that he won't use us as gunmen, and fight those zombies? Does being with him guarantee that our lives won't get any worse? To put it a little darker, this also involves some rights issues. Anything, once associated with the word Quan, becomes a bit complicated. Guan Hong stopped in front of a door, turned his head, took a deep look at Linen, and then pushed open the door. At this moment, the two sides of a long table inside were already full of people, and some people even had no place to sit, so they could only stand aside. Linen reckoned, at least 60 or 60 people were crowded in this conference room, which was only a few dozen square meters. The moment Guan Hong pushed the door open, countless gazes came towards Linen like an awl, and among them, goodwill and malice intersected. Linen instinctively activates the mind reader ability to the maximum. Then, one by one, he looked at everyone in the conference room. In the end, I guessed that I had some ideas in my heart, and calmly walked with Guan Hong to the farthest part of the long table, which belongs to the main seat position. Guan Hong stepped forward, turned his head expressionlessly, and looked at a research institute sitting next to him, also wearing a white coat. Please make a seat for the guests. The researcher, hesitating to speak, finally got up and stood aside to participate in the meeting. But Guan Hong just pulled up his chair and juxtaposed it with his own. Please take a seat. He showed his attitude and determination with his actions. In the silent conference room, all eyes were fixed on Linen, as if they were asking, "Do you dare to sit down?" Linen just smiled slightly. "Thank you." Then, under the unkind gaze of many people, he fluttered and sat down. Did he actually sit down? Everyone's eyes widened with disbelief written all over their faces. Looking at the expressions of these people, Linen just smiled calmly and playfully. Although they already have a sense of rights and the idea of maintaining the existing stability and order, these people have finally transformed from scientific researchers, and they have completely lost the wolf-like nature of daring to touch my flesh and directly bite you to death. Coupled with the fact that Guan Hong was pressing down there, these people only showed some dissatisfaction, and there was not even a single person who took the initiative to oppose it. Linen is slightly sorry. I thought things were going to get a little rougher. Just thinking about it, Guan Hong has already said, this time I called everyone here to discuss the transfer of the top talents from the research laboratory to Guizhou Island. The voice fell, and one person stood up from the starting position. I'm not optimistic about this. I strongly urge that we continue to maintain the existing order of. Guan Hong nodded lightly, non-committal, as if he had anticipated the current situation. Is it because of safety issues? Guan Hong nodded lightly. You have said this many times. The man's expression was excited and his voice was like a piglet waiting to be slaughtered. Guizhou Island is not too short from our location. If we encounter an attack on the road, we simply don't have the ability to deal with it. You have also seen those situations outside, and you have seen the relocation of the camp. What kind of consequences it will lead to? Guan Hong, you can't do this. As soon as the voice fell, other people around agreed. That's right. It's better to be safe in this matter. I think our current stronghold is very safe, and there is absolutely no need to migrate. Guan Hong, I know you have always wanted to do something big, but since you have invested in it, there will be the possibility of loss. It's better for us to take a conservative approach. You can dig a tunnel from the research room to the lonely island. In this way, I believe that everyone will not have too many complaints. Linen listened a little funny. In front of these people, in order not to move their nests, it can be said that they are doing everything they can. Although the research institute is not too far from Lonely Island. However, that is based on the speed of the vehicle as a comparison. I have to open a tunnel to dig through it. I really don't know how to get the year of the monkey and the horse moon. Even, maybe not long after the project was carried out, they were blocked by these people for some other reason and there was no following. It seems that you have to give them some peace of mind and keep their mouths shut. Linen coughed lightly and said slowly, I don't understand professional matters, but there is nothing wrong with ensuring your safety. As soon as the words fell, a man also wearing a white coat and a pair of triangular eyes stood up. The man stared at Lin and with hatred in his eyes. Looking at it like that, it was like losing his parents to Lin. He gritted his teeth and said word by word, "Young people don't mess around while adults are talking. This is not your place to talk." On the other side, another person said with a yin and yang strange air, "That is, you said that you can guarantee our safety? It's just evolutionary, we are not without evolutionary." Hearing the words of the two, Lin didn't get angry, just thought. Jin Yu, who was originally flying in the sky, suddenly felt something and stood still. The next moment, the research room was gusty. Everyone subconsciously covered their faces with their hands. When the gust of wind dissipated, everyone put down their fingers, and their eyes suddenly straightened, and their faces were full of horror. An eagle, 2 people tall, appeared beside Lin. Eagle's eyes are sharp, and his eyes are full of murderous intent. A feather made of pure gold, under the illumination of the light, shone with a golden light that could not be seen directly. It was Lin who used the teleport ability to teleport Jin Yu directly to his side. This is another development of Lin's teleportation ability under the circumstance of speeding up thinking. At present, he can already teleport other creatures at a fixed point. Of course, it is only limited to when it is still, and the distance cannot be too far, about 10 kilometers range, in order to accurately transmit. For a time, the breathing of those present stopped for a while. The eagle in front of me, although I don't know what species it is. However, with the terrifying aura emanating from him, everyone did not hesitate. As long as they made a slight movement, the next moment, the falcon in front of them would rush up fiercely and tear them to pieces. The person who spoke at the beginning lost his previous momentum at this time. Staring straight at Lin, his expression was a little timid. You wouldn't just want to kill us, would you?" Lin was amused and speechless. Originally, it was just Jin Yu who came out to make these people quiet and quickly discuss a result. Who would have thought that these people actually thought of assassination directly? It is really a high place for a long time, the butt has become a brain. With a slightly disdainful expression on his face, Lin said lightly. "The ability of Jin Yu is enough to escort you all the way to safety. If you are really worried, you can even let Jin Yu carry out multiple batches of pick-up and drop-off tasks. I think those zombies haven't evolved the ability to stretch their wings on their backs." Everyone was speechless. Clap clap clap. Suddenly, Guan Hong patted lightly, a soft smile on his face. "Ladies and gentlemen, I think Mr. Lin has already explained to us the issue of ensuring the safety of personnel. Do you have any questions?" A group of people looked at each other. After pondering for a while, one person gritted his teeth in fear. "Okay, even if you can ensure the safety of the personnel, how can you guarantee the safety of transportation? Many of the equipment in this institute are precious things that can no longer be produced. It's definitely not an easy job if you want to transport it." As soon as the voice fell, everyone seemed to find a life-saving straw and reunited again and again. "Yes, so many machines want to move, this is no small matter. What if it's damaged? Can you afford the responsibility? I think it's better to think about the transfer from a long-term perspective. Otherwise, there is really something wrong with chapter, and no one can take responsibility for this. Now we are very likely to be the last place in the world with scientific research capabilities. We must not completely ruin the future of mankind because of the confused decision you two made." The more people talked, the more excited their expressions became. In the end, some people even simply ignored Jin Yu's deterrence and directly pointed at Lin and asked angrily, "What kind of ecstasy soup did you give Guan Hong to make him believe you so deadly?" Guan Hong frowned. "Everyone has something to say, don't be so excited." "Aren't you excited?" The man in the white coat who started talking couldn't help roaring. "If you don't express your position, the future of mankind will be all over." "Guan Hong, I don't care where you got such a hairy boy, if you don't give practical evidence today, I will never move out from here." Obviously, in order not to leave the institute, these people have exhausted their means. If you let them continue to mess around like this, things will become endless. Thinking of this, Lin interrupted directly. "I can prove to you that this time the migration is absolutely safe." Although the words were brief, they carried the aura of an irrefutable superior. When the originally excited crowd heard the words, they couldn't help but be slightly taken aback. A group of people looked at each other, a little speechless. Long ago, everyone had been disrupted by Lin's original rhythm. At this time, expressing opinions here is completely a hot mess. As for what Lin will say after his speech, these people have not thought about it at all. Seeing these people's expressions, it was not difficult for Lin to guess their mental activities at this time. Turning his head to look at Guan Hong, Lin said, "Tell up the satellite image of KJ City." Guan Hong was slightly surprised for a moment. However, he still turned his head to the assistant standing in the corner of the conference room. "Do as Mr. Lin said." The assistant moves. After a while, the huge projector projected images on the white curtain wall. Into the eye, the wreckage of the ruins, the broken walls. A desolate scene. However, in one of them, a huge deep pit attracted everyone's attention. Did someone drop a tactical nuke here? The triangular eyes stared straight at the scene on the screen, and the expression on his face was a little puzzled. What's the point of showing us this? If I guessed correctly, Mr. Lin should have made this deep pit, right? Guan Hong's eyes were locked on the projection screen, and his heart was shocked. Guan Hong also estimated Lin's strength and means before. But whether Lin summoned the blue-colored mutant falcon before, or the terrifying destructive power displayed by the satellite screen now, all of this exceeded Guan Hong's original expectations. Judging from the surface crystallization conditions reflected in the image and the layout created by the surrounding shockwaves, the explosive power of creating this crater is already equivalent to a mid-level tactical nuclear bomb. No, maybe even stronger. Guan Hong couldn't keep the expression on his face. This destructive power is beyond the scope of ordinary cultivators. Taking a deep breath, Guan Hong said slowly, looking around at the dumbfounded people in front of him. "Everyone, I think you should have no other questions now, right? Mr. Lin has proved to you with what actually happened that he has the ability to guarantee the safety during transportation. Everyone is unwilling." Triangle eyes glanced at the other colleagues around him, and his eyes suddenly locked on one of them. If Liang Chun did this kind of thing, even if he couldn't compare to this guy named Lin, he wouldn't be much worse. Hearing the words, Liang Chun nodded slightly guilty. "That's right, and a deep pit doesn't mean anything. I'm also an evolutionary person. If I'm right, I won't necessarily lose to you." Before he finished speaking, Liang Chun met Lin's eyes. Profound. Calm. Like a deep spring, no emotion can be seen. "If you keep talking like this, you might die." This thought popped into my mind. Liang Chun swallowed the rest of his words. Seeing that Liang Chun was no longer speaking, Lin retracted his gaze. Looking around at everyone in the conference room, Lin said with a calm expression, "If I want 10 seconds and you're all dead." Although the tone was calm, everyone present couldn't help but feel a kind of fear from the bottom of their hearts. From the beginning of the end of the world to the present, although these people present were from researchers. However, all kinds of dangers have been seen to some extent, and these people can be regarded as people with firm minds. But at this time, Lin opened his mouth like a tiger entering a flock. That kind of natural predator fear makes everyone's body tremble slightly because of fear. However, this emotion only lasted for a moment, and everyone returned to their senses. With a look of embarrassment on his face, Liang Chun stood up from his seat and yelled at Lin. "What if you have a mutant beast? I won't necessarily lose to you if I fight alone. If I don't accept it, let's practice." Good. Lin nodded and stood up. "Lead the way." Hearing the words, these people present did not hesitate and got up one after another. After years of hard work in Qianlong Sanctuary, these people have the same understanding. The various facilities in the Qianlong Sanctuary, because these were installed by them. At this time, Guan Hong did not know where to find a guy who looked cold and unpopular, that was so domineering in his words and actions. While everyone resisted, there was also a sudden feeling that an old hen's eggs were about to be stolen. Enduring the anger and dissatisfaction in their hearts, everyone left the conference room first. On the way, Triangle Eyes approached Liang Chun and said in a low voice, "Liang Chun, how sure are you to meet him this time?" "I don't know." Liang Chun shook his head, glanced calmly at Lin who was walking behind him, and lowered his voice. Although this guy didn't take action personally, the mutant beast beside him is obviously not weak. Zhang Yang. This time, Guan Hong may have really found some amazing guy. Zhang Yang's face changed when he heard the words, his eyes became more and more gloomy, and he didn't even notice when his fingers touched the flesh. In all fairness, Zhang Yang does not resist Guan Hong, a leader who has dreams and is good to everyone. After all, in such a dark and chaotic world, there is still a person who can fight for all mankind without any selfishness, which is as rare as gold. It's just that Zhang Yang doesn't understand. Why did Guanhong take all the Qianlong sanctuary that everyone worked so hard to protect and take away just because an outsider casually said a few words? Not only that, even the evolutionary who protects the Qianlong sanctuary must follow along. If they were gone, wouldn't this place be an empty shell? The more he thought about it, the more angry he became. Zhang Yang couldn't help but turn his face and ask. Guanhong, if everyone leaves, who will protect those ordinary people? Does it mean that in this world, apart from the strong and the weak, there is no right to live? Hearing the question, Guanhong stopped and his expression became a little complicated. With a click of the nozzle, Guanhong said hesitantly. I've thought about this too. It's just that if we continue to stay here, nothing will change, and we're just lingering on. Speaking, Guanhong's expression became firm. I believe in Mr. Lin, and I also believe that he can bring everyone together to solve the current problems. Everyone gathers firewood and the flames are high. With only the talents and equipment of the Qianlong sanctuary, we can't save everyone. So migration is necessary. You. Zhang Yang's face changed again and again. Crazy. This guy Guanhong is absolutely crazy. Taking a deep breath, Zhang Yang sneered. Quadruple A, since you have decided to do this, then I have no choice but to compete in the arena. After speaking, Zhang Yang stopped staying and strode forward. Seeing Zhang Yang walking away, Guanhong took a deep breath and turned to look at Lin with an apologetic expression on his face. Mr. Lin, I'm really sorry. This situation in Qianlong Sanctuary has been going on for quite some time. Zhang Yang just wants to protect everyone in the institute and maintain the existing order. As for his nature, it's not that bad. Lin nodded and said nothing. Although everyone in the research room used words to provoke them. However, Lin did not agree with them. After all, these people are just talking shit, and there is no excessive insidious behavior. Everything is still discussed and debated within the rules. If they have something to say, let them say it, and if they have a problem, they must solve it. If everyone's position is different, then they only need to make them realize one thing, then everything can be reversed immediately. As for this matter is also very simple, that is, I am good enough, also strong enough, much better than you guys. Lin doesn't mind showing his power to them as long as he can achieve his goals as soon as possible. After a while, the space in front of the group of people who walked out of the underground research room became wider. Walking out of the air defense tunnel, Zhang Yang led the way, and soon, he saw an open space that was specially opened and cleared, the size of which was similar to a football field. At this moment, I don't know who leaked the news, or deliberately released the limelight, and released the news that Lin was going to fight the evolutionaries. Around, there are already many survivors with nothing at hand, and even soldiers who are resting, all came to the vicinity to watch. Vaguely, Lin could hear the discussions of these people. What happened? I heard that there is a new evolutionary person who wants to compete with Liang Chun. What? Someone dares to challenge Liang Chun. He is one of the most powerful evolutionaries in our Qianlong sanctuary. Who knows, maybe it's because the calf is not afraid of tigers. After all, the evolutionary people who can survive in the last days are all strong, and it is not natural to have confidence in themselves. Lin listened for a while, and found that what these people were discussing were basically nothing nutritious, so he ignored it. Turning his eyes again, Lin saw a few familiar figures on the side of the stand. His eyes softened, Lin nodded lightly at these girls, then walked into the arena without looking sideways. In the stands, Lu Yao also noticed Lin's gaze. Seeing Lin's soft smile and gentle eyes, Lu Yao couldn't help but look away, feeling a little dear in her heart. But soon, Lu Yao turned his head to the side again, and said with a pouting mouth. This guy, laughing in front of us in front of so many people, doesn't that mean putting the spotlight on us? When the people around him heard the words, they covered their mouths and chuckled. Isn't his smile not good looking? Good looking. Lu Yao replied subconsciously, and immediately reacted again. He explained anxiously. Wait, I didn't mean that, I mean. After a while, several girls slapped each other into a ball, attracting the attention of many audiences. Although they were teasing each other, the girls did not mention anything about Lin's fight with others. The reason is also very simple, because there is no suspense. Having been with Lin for so long, Lu Yao and others have a clear understanding of how strong Lin is. Even if the mutant animals around him are not used, Lin only relies on his own strength, which is an existence that people cannot match and can only look up to. You came with that Lin, right? I really don't understand, you can still laugh at such a time. A voice came from beside him. Liu Yao retracted his gaze, turned his head to look, and saw a man in a white coat with triangular eyes, who was looking at him with dissatisfaction and contempt. Who was this person? Yin Xiaoxiao blinked and shrank behind Zhang Qingshui unconsciously. Liu Yao, do you know each other? Liu Yao thought for a while, then shook his head and said. This person has never been seen before. Listening to what he said just now, it seems to be someone from the research institute. Zhang Yang snorted and said coldly. If it weren't for you outsiders doing things here deliberately, the Qianlong sanctuary would have been able to last until the end of the apocalypse. As a result, when you came, you made this Qianlong sanctuary a mess. You are still here, as if nothing happened. Having said that, Zhang Yang glanced off the field, showing a little confidence on his face. However, Liang Chun will tell you, young people should not be too proud, or they will fall over sooner or later. Although Zhang Yang's words were not too explicit, the meaning expressed in them was clear. Seeing the expressions of the girls in front of him, Zhang Yang also knew that they understood the meaning of his words. However, as expected, the picture of these people arguing with themselves did not appear. After hearing their own words, the girls looked at each other, nodding and smiling in agreement. Looking at it like that, he didn't take the cruel words he said to heart at all. For a time, Zhang Yang only felt that he had punched cotton with all his strength. There is a feeling of being light and fluttering, and I almost flashed my waist if I didn't exert any effort. The nameless anger in his heart rose rapidly, and he couldn't vent it. Zhang Yang could only take a deep breath and set his eyes on the field again. At this time, Lin and Liang Chun were already standing in the field. Staring at Liang Chun in front of him, Lin nodded lightly. I'm in a hurry, let's get started. Okay. Liang Chun was nervous and didn't say much. As soon as the voice fell, his hands suddenly formed a hollow circle in front of his chest. Be careful. Liang Chun shouted loudly, and at the same time exerted strength with both hands. The next moment, a large spiral airflow suddenly formed from the hollow between Liang Quan's hands. This airflow formed a small air mass in the blink of an eye and shot straight towards Linen. The speed of the air mass was very fast, and almost as soon as it was released, it made a harsh sound like a whip being drawn in the air. Seeing the move, Linen did not respond, and the expression on Liang Quan's face became a little puzzled. This air cannon was a surefire trick that Liang Chun had practiced for a long time and figured out. Not only is the forming speed extremely fast, but the flying speed and destructive power have already completely surpassed the anti-material rifle before the end. In this case, even an evolutionary whose body has been greatly strengthened, there is absolutely no possibility of dodging within a certain distance. He must lose. Before the thought in his mind had completely dissipated, the air cannon had already flown to Linen. Facing the air cannon that was approaching in the blink of an eye, Linen just turned slightly sideways. At this moment, time seemed to be constantly slowing down, and the air cannon almost flew past his clothes. Pong! With a loud noise, the air cannon slammed into the open space. The solid ground was instantly smashed into a pit that was at least 5 meters wide, like an explosion of a cannonball. When he missed, Liang Chun couldn't believe it. What? How did you escape? Linen didn't answer, just tilted his head towards Liang Chun. His expression was indifferent, his eyes seemed to ask. Were you attacking just now? You. Liang Chun felt his blood surge. In the next instant, Liang Chun put his hands on his chest again. Then, a series of air cannons shot towards Linen at a rapid speed like a bullet. Exclamations from the stands. Is Liang Chun trying to kill someone? The density of this air cannon can't be avoided at all. Who was that person? How did he offend Liang Chun? He actually made Liang Chun make such a killing move. Dead hands are forbidden among evolutionaries. Before he finished speaking, Linen walked out from the gap between several air cannons like a butterfly wearing flowers. From the beginning to the end, only the corners of the clothes were rattled by the wind. Everyone in the stands was startled again, their mouths wide open and speechless. Seeing the scene in front of him, not only everyone on the stage, but even Liang Quan's expression became a little dull. Since becoming an evolver, Liang Chun has experienced countless battles, big and small. Whether it's dealing with those zombies, or practicing with other people in the institute. No one has ever been able to dodge the attack of his own air cannon so easily. Suddenly, when Liang Chun saw Linen stopped, he tilted his head to himself again. Don't waste time, who else wants to come together? Linen looked at the others, he didn't want to waste any more time. Don't talk big. Liang Chun gritted his teeth and said every word, "It's easy to pull with big steps." Lin An didn't say a word, and looked at Liang Chun calmly. Although nothing has been said, it has already explained everything. Silence is the greatest contempt. Liang Chun was in a hurry and sneered. "Okay. Since you are not afraid of death yourself, then you can't blame me." With that said, Liang Chun turned his head and shouted from the stand. "Since Lin An wants us to go together, let's go together." In the stands, a few people's expressions became hesitant. Liang Quan's expression was angry. "Do you really want to see him hollow out Qianlong?" Several people in the stands then jumped off the stage reluctantly. Walking to Liang Quan's side, a person lowered his voice and said, "Liang Chun, although I don't know what happened, but I think his strength should be very strong. If there is any misunderstanding, just sit down and have a good chat and talk things over. There's no need to fight like this." "Yeah." Another person nodded and said, "It's not easy for everyone to survive in this apocalypse now. You have to forgive people and forgive them. There's no need to make things so rigid." Some of these evolutionaries did not participate in the meeting, and they probably do not know why they are so troubled. "You guys." Liang Quan's eyes were dissatisfied. "If we lose this time, what Qianlong Shelter said might be over. At that time, I will see that you are still saying such things." When a few people around heard it, they were stunned at first, and then their expressions became serious as if thinking of something. Looking back on Lin An again, the few people stopped talking about various methods. For a time, someone slapped both hands and pulled out an anti-equipment rifle, while another person suddenly grew bigger and punched Lin An from the side. In the face of these people's attacks, exclamations came from the stands from time to time. However, facing these attacks, Lin An seemed to be walking in his back garden. Every time it seems to be light, moving a few steps will dissolve the attacks of these people invisible. After a few minutes, Lin An stopped and shook his head when he noticed that the offensive of the people present was slowing down. "Stop." Hearing the words, the people besieging Lin An instinctively stopped, looking at Lin An with some horror and some admiration in their eyes. From Liang Quan's words just now, everyone probably guessed the cause and effect of the incident. However, when the shot was made, he still had a conscience in his heart and did not do his best. But even so, Lin An was able to dodge everyone's attacks so lightly under the attack of everyone, which in itself was enough to show that Lin An's strength was above them. One person is thinking about whether or not to make a round, and press things down like this. Lin An suddenly said, "Seriously, when you zombies and fights, is this also the case?" Lin An's tone remained flat. However, there is a bit of a general meaning in the words that the teacher teaches the students. This condescending attitude instantly ignited the anger in the hearts of several people. The cultivator who originally wanted to persuade him to calm down changed his face and became angry. "Okay, since that's the case." Offended, Liang Chun was also really angry at this time. Hearing the words of his companions, he gritted his teeth. "If you don't make a move, I'm going to use the ultimate move." Lin An nodded. "Come." Hearing the words, everyone no longer hesitated to use their strongest means. Just this stab. Lin An no longer dodges. On the contrary, Lin An lowered his body slightly, like a cheetah about to kill its prey. At this moment, the air cannon in Liang Quan's hand was already formed. Unlike before, the tip of this air cannon has a cone shape. Before it could be released, the surrounding air was already crackling due to the high-speed rotation of the airflow. "Go with." Liang Chun shouted, and the air cannon in his hand flew towards Lin An. At the same time, Lin An also moved. The moment the air cannon flew out, Lin An appeared in front of Liang like a teleportation. With his superb physical strength, Lin Anshi's movement speed has surpassed the limit that Liang Chun and others can detect with the naked eye. Aware that Lin An came to the front, Liang Quan's eyes widened in disbelief. Just as he was about to react, Lin An's uppercut hit Liang Quan's chin. The vagus nerve was severely hit, and Liang Chun felt the world spinning, and then his eyes went black, and he fell heavily on the ground, unconscious. The others only reacted at this time, and they all released their own moves to Lin An. However, before these people could release their moves, Lin An got short, took 2 steps under his feet, and approached the other person. Straight punch. Punch. Shooting. He attacked 3 times in a row, and the beating man swayed left and right like a rag puppet. By the time Lin An received his move, the man fell to the ground with his eyes rolled white just like Liang Chun. In the blink of an eye, 2 people were broken in a row, and there was an instant uproar in the stands. "No way? How did he do it? It's too fast." Which of you saw what just happened? I see that person standing in the same place at first, and appeared in front of Liang Chun in the next second. Where the hell did this guy come from? This is too perverted. Hearing the audience talking in the stands, Lu Yao and the other 3 girls just smiled lightly, with a faintly proud expression on their faces. Just as everyone was talking, Lin had already dealt with all the remaining people with fists and feet. It seemed that it was just a few blinks, and after that, Lin was the only one who could stand on the field. In the distance, watching all this publicity all the time, completely numb. This is simply crushing. The discussion stopped. The crowd turned back subconsciously. Looking at the mess in the arena, a group of people couldn't help but look at each other. For Lin, these audiences do not know. However, for those lying on the ground, the people in the institute, couldn't be more clear. These people randomly pull out one, and that is a pillar-like existence in the entire Qianlong Research Institute. On weekdays, facing those mutant zombies and other monsters, these people can easily deal with them. But today, in front of Lin, these people are as helpless as 3-year-old children. Even, from the beginning to the end, these people did not reach the corner of Lin's clothes. Seeing that all his masters fell to the ground, like overthrown dolls, Zhang Yang on the stage couldn't help taking a deep breath. Who the hell is this guy? Before he could continue to sigh, Lin suddenly turned his eyes to Zhang Yang. Looking at each other, Zhang Yang couldn't help but take a step back and said subconsciously. Calm down, I'm just thinking about Qianlong. Lin has no intention of continuing to entangle with this guy whose mind is still a little unclear. Now I've proved my strength. Lin interrupted, what else do you have to say? Lin's words were flat, but like thunder. Zhang Yang shivered and reacted. The reason why Lin is here is because people like him are dissatisfied. At this time, Lin used clear actions and facts to prove to everyone that what Lin said did not seep through. This person, from the beginning to the end, is only to transfer talents and achieve his purpose. And I kept thinking that he would hurt me. This feeling. How ridiculous. Just as he was stunned, other people around him also looked over. Zhang Yang looked at the inquiring eyes of these people, and only felt that these eyes were like invisible slaps, slapped on his face, burning hot and painful. It's just that, at this point, if I don't continue to stick to my position, I'm afraid it will be difficult for me to step down from Taiwan. Even if he followed other people to the Qianlong Research Institute, he would inevitably be used by those who would like to use his performance today. Absolutely, can't let this happen. His face changed again and again. Zhang Yang took a deep breath and said through gritted teeth. Even so what? No matter how strong you are alone, can you still take care of the entire team by yourself? Lin's brows trembled slightly, and he didn't have the idea of continuing to reason with the stubborn guy in front of him. No matter what the other party's reason is, looking at his current state, if there is not enough threat, he may not be able to recognize the truth at all. Thinking of this, Lin no longer hesitated, raised his right hand, and punched Zhang Yang Yao Yao. Lin's punch came quickly and quickly. Almost at the moment of punching, a strong wind twisted and formed at the end of Lin's fist. Snapped. Boom. In the next instant, along with the gas explosion and the sharp whistling sound produced by the sonic boom, a shockwave visible to the naked eye flew straight out, drowning Zhang Yang's remaining words. Crash. The harsh sound of collision made everyone present stagnate for breath. When the voice dissipated, Zhang Yang stood there dumbfounded, and the rest of the crowd were dumbfounded and couldn't believe it. Everyone's eyes stared blankly at Zhang Yang. Seeing the eyes of everyone turn, Zhang Yang also subconsciously pressed his hair, and his own hair was almost blown into a chicken coop just now. Zhang Yang murmured unconsciously, depend on. How could it be possible? With such a distance, he could only rely on the wind of his fists to make his face feel the stinging pain like being cut by the wind. When he turned his head and looked, he could see that someone in the crowd was looking at this side with frightened eyes. How can this be? If that punch was aimed at my head and punched outside. Zhang Yang muttered to himself, and the whole person was a little dazed. As a researcher, he can be said to have watched those who evolved to become stronger. Whether it is ability or physical quality, he has a judgment in his heart. Even if Lin is talented, how can he not have such a terrible physical quality? Could it be that he is in the direction of strengthening his physical fitness? But judging from the information he knows, he is clearly not. Can this be done with just one punch, with sheer strength? Is this fake? Zhang Yang doubted that he was dreaming. Just then, the crowd was in an uproar. Everyone looked at Lin with panic and shock in their eyes. Hearing the exclamations of the people around him, Zhang Yang trembled and regained his senses. Little trembling uncontrollably, Zhang Yang lowered his head, not daring to meet Lin An's eyes. Seeing this scene in front of him, no matter how slow and stupid he is, and he tries to persevere, Zhang Yang also understands that Lin An is pouring water from beginning to end. The words he said before were not harsh words. As long as he thought about it, in this Qianlong Research Institute, it was really impossible for a person to go out vertically. Not only was it publicity, but other senior research institute executives who had come to watch the battle together also fell silent at this time. At this point, the onlookers who did not know the truth on the field were excited and shocked. The silence that knows the inside story. There were two completely different atmospheres in the entire stand. It seems that you all understand. Guanhong's face was full of smiles. This time we will go to Dawn Refuge without any setbacks. Everyone can relax too. Relax. Zhang Yang looked defeated. The top research talents and top evolutionaries have all been taken away. How can we maintain this place? Regardless of the equipment and other related supporting equipment to be transported away. There are only some ordinary people left in the entire research institute. What's the point of this research institute's existence? You don't have to worry about that. Lin An didn't know when to appear beside Guanhong. I only accept people who sincerely follow me. The production potential of the institute will only become greater when the corresponding people and things are delivered. Besides, even if I take away some of the facilities of the research institute, I will not stop the supply of medicines originally belonging to Qianlong, nor will I hide the success of the research. At that time, all kinds of medicines and other life-related resources will be continuously fed back to the Qianlong Research Institute along the transportation channel. Having said that, Lin An took a deep look at Zhang Yang. It's no longer a situation where everyone is hiding in a safe corner and fighting each other. The times have changed. However, far water can't save near fire. Zhang Yang's expression was a little anxious. Even if you concentrate all the talent, it does increase productivity after a period of time. However, what we need to address is the immediate problem. Now the water resources and living materials of the whole institute are in short supply. If you take away some people, especially the evolutionary ones, it will be difficult for us to even collect materials, and we will immediately fall into a crisis. Taking a look at Guanhong, seeing that Guanhong nodded slightly to himself, after confirming that the matter was true, Lin An's mind moved. The line of sight in front of him suddenly changed. A square storage room of about 100 cubic meters appeared in sight. Lin An opened the virtual space and searched in it for a while, and soon found the plant seeds placed in the corner. Connecting the trouser pocket to the space, when Lin An took it out again, a cloth bag containing seeds appeared in his hand. Give the seeds to Guanhong, Lin An said. These seeds are all mutated. As long as the biological blood is absorbed, the growth can be accelerated. With these things in place, you should be able to meet your food needs. On the other hand, Guanhong was stunned, and subconsciously took the seed. Mr. Lin, do you mean that the flesh and blood of zombies and mutant animals can also accelerate growth? Lin An nodded. If you lack the means of hunting, you can also let the plants absorb fertility and water on their own and let them grow on their own in the sun. It's just that the speed is relatively slow. Lin An thought for a while and added another sentence. And absorbing flesh and blood can be harvested in one day. Even if it is just the number of these seeds, the food produced is enough for the daily needs of 10,000 people. If you let the plants grow on their own, it takes about a week or more. Everyone present couldn't help but take another breath of cold air. Whether it is a peaceful age or a doomsday wasteland, the most important things are nothing more than food, clothing and shelter. Among them, food is the most important. As early as before, everyone at the Qianlong Research Institute had long been troubled by the source of food and clean fresh water. Who would have thought that, under such circumstances, the man in front of him could have such a miraculous effect by taking out a handful of seeds? As for Lin An's words, even Zhang Yang is convinced. He has fully used his strength to shock him. And Lin An doesn't seem like the kind of person who would go to entertain others or lie in his spare time. Okay, everyone. Suddenly, Guanhong clapped his hands, and his face was full of smiles. The problems that have caused us the most headaches have all been resolved. I'm sure you won't have any other opinions. In this case, let's act immediately. After all, we don't have much time left. Zhang Yang nodded, then walked to Lin An. As soon as he bent down, Zhang Yang looked reverent. I'm sorry, Mr. Lin, my attitude towards you was too bad before, I hope you can forgive me. Lin An nodded lightly. You are also for the research institute, understandable. Convinced orally? Or superficially friendly? It doesn't matter to Linen. Anyway, Zhang Yang, he didn't have the idea of receiving it into Dawning or Lonely Island. In any case, as long as it doesn't hinder him, it will be fine. After that, Linen and Guan Hong walked to the periphery of the institute. Linen, can I try the effect of this seed first? Guan Hong asked in a low voice. Linen has no choice but to smile. Okay, I will spawn a few more rounds in a while. With enough numbers, you can try it on a small scale first. Guan Hong rarely showed a happy expression. That's great. We don't have much food here before the corpse tide arrives. You really helped a lot. Linen smiled and shook his head. Just tell me if you have any questions. I'm here to take the research institute away, so I have to leave something behind. You can explain it here. Okay. Guan Hong nodded heavily. He pushed his glasses and said, we have to prepare how to move these research equipment. There are transport planes, but there are still those issues, such as how to ensure a safe landing. No suitable tarmac. 0. Without the tower system command, I can only rely on satellite positioning to fly. To be honest, if you hadn't spoken, I would never have dared to use a transport plane to transport it. Linen nodded and said with a smile, I also expected this matter. Leave the transport plane to me. You can go and try my mutant plants first, on the transport plane. I'll make a decision after reading it. It is not difficult to transport the equipment, but how much effort can it take to move it away? The difficulty is to establish a research institute in the Dawning base that meets the standards and enables these research equipment to function normally. The research institute does not mean that it can operate just by placing it in the house, and it is also very harsh on the environment. But fortunately, Linen also had an idea for a long time. With the ability to strengthen, there are all possibilities. You traveled a long way, and you encountered such a thing. If you work hard, I will arrange for someone to find a place for you to rest. Guan Hong said with some guilt. Linen just smiled. It's a small matter, you don't need to rest. You can try the plants first. I want to see the transport plane. Okay. Guan Hong naturally agreed, and directly asked his secretary, a young man who also looked polite, to take Linen to the tarmac. And he put away those plant seeds as treasures, and took out the radio in the pocket of his white coat. Let the Secretary of Logistics come to me. It didn't take long for a middle-aged man to arrive in a hurry in a jeep. What's wrong? The middle-aged man looked haggard and tired. He was Lu Chengfeng, who was in charge of the logistics of Qianlong Refuge. Guan Hong pushed his glasses, handed the seed to Chengfeng Lu, and repeated what Lin said to him. This is impossible. Lu Chengfeng was stunned for a moment, then looked at the cloth bag in his hand that almost contained thousands of seeds. You want to tell me that with just these thousands of seeds, one round of harvest can satisfy the food consumption of 10,000 people a day? This kind of joke is not funny, Guan Hong. Lu Chengfeng's brows furrowed. Staring at the seeds, Lu Chengfeng couldn't help but be suspicious. As for what happened just now, when he came, Lu Chengfeng had already asked his colleagues. But at this time, looking at the bag of seeds in Guan Hong's hand, Lu Chengfeng instinctively denied what he had heard before. He definitely said these words in order to successfully reduce the resistance to migration, Lu Chengfeng said. Hearing this, Guan Hong shook his head and said, Old Lu, Mr. Lin is not such a person. This matter can't be sloppy. Lu Chengfeng raised his voice. Where is that Linen? Let him come to me. I will ask him face to face. At this time, Linen hadn't gone far when he heard a voice and turned his head. A group of Research Institute executives were stunned, and several of them eyes lit up. It seems that Lao Lu is angry. This is a good opportunity. The other person also had a malicious face. Zhengchu had no reason to object, so don't worry about it now. As he was talking, one of them turned his head and shouted, Someone has questioned you. Why don't you answer it? Linen stopped, turned around, and saw Lu Chengfeng rushing over. Frowning, Chengfeng Lu looked at Linen with a hint of dissatisfaction on his face. You are the one who gave the seeds. Linen nodded. My name is Linen. Lu Chengfeng snorted. I admit that you are very powerful, and I also admit that you have the means, but you can't fool us directly with such a broken seed. Do you know how many mutations it takes for a plant to evolve? And it's unheard of for crop seeds to absorb flesh and blood. As soon as the voice fell, the senior leaders of other research institutes around seemed to have found a life-saving straw. Eyes lit up, and a group of people raised their voices. That's right. If the food problem can't be solved today, you can't take away the talents from the Qianlong Research Institute. Yes, otherwise, if they leave, the food supply in our institute will be in short supply. Who can take responsibility for the riot at the Qianlong Research Institute? Guanhong, is that you? Hearing everyone talking, Guanhong shook his head gently. Everyone, I have absolute trust in Mr. Lin, and I hope you can believe in Mr. Lin as much as you believe in me. He is not an ordinary person. Not an ordinary person. Lu Chengfeng sneered. You and I both know that even an evolutionary person is not omnipotent. How can such a thing be settled casually? Having said that, Lu Chengfeng turned his head and set his eyes on Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang, I have always trusted you. After all, you are someone who thinks about Qianlong Research Institute. Before, you have always been against Guanhong's nonsense. Why did you call me here today, but let me watch a farce? And you were on the side, as if nothing happened. At this time, Zhang Yang had lost his temper. Hearing the questioning, he turned his head to one side and did not answer, like a plant that had been beaten. Lu Chengfeng was even more angry. Just as he was about to speak, he heard a clear voice like a yellow warbler from above the stands. If you don't believe it, you'll know if you try it yourself. Why are you embarrassing Linen here? Hearing the words, Lu Chengfeng turned his head. When he turned his head, he saw a rather sweet-looking girl glaring at him and others. Lu Yao stared at Lu Chengfeng angrily, and couldn't understand at all. The people he met before were obviously very rational. How come Qianlong is here, and each of the people here is better than each other to find trouble? This person looks good, and he should have come with the young man in front of him. Lu Chengfeng thought in his heart, hating Wu Jiwu, and the expression on his face became unkind. Little girl, this matter has nothing to do with you. Can I draw hasty conclusions about the lives and deaths of tens of thousands of people involved in this matter? Lu Chengfeng said, and snorted coldly. I just said that I want to experiment, but now I suddenly don't want to be so anxious. What is there to believe in a liar? Hearing the words, Lu Yao was very angry. Reaching out to hold Yin Xiaoxiao on the side, Lu Yao said with some dissatisfaction. Why is this guy's mouth so stinky? Okay, Lubin, calm down. Yin Xiaoxiao patted Lu Yao's back lightly and whispered, let's just ignore him. That won't work. Lu Yao rolled his eyes and suddenly changed to a provocative expression. Are you the so-called Minister of Logistics? Are you afraid that after this seed is really planted, you are worried that we will successfully take people away and thus affect your status, so you are picking our thorns here? I really can't see it. You are 40 or 50 years old to say the least, and you have such a small stomach. What did you say? Lu Chengfeng widened his eyes and raised his voice. As the logistics director of the Qianlong Research Institute, from the beginning of the end to the present, Lu Chengfeng has been working diligently in his position, worrying about the logistics of the entire Qianlong refuge. There are many people living in Qianlong refuge, and some evolutionaries have a surprisingly large appetite. One meal can eat 4 or 5 people's rations for a day. In the early days of the apocalypse, due to the relatively sufficient supplies in the surrounding supermarkets and other places, Lu Chengfeng was not under a lot of pressure at first. But as time went by, the surrounding materials were gradually swept away. There are also signs of food shortages in the Qianlong Research Institute. Lu Chengfeng has always been troubled by this matter. Today, hearing that there is hope for the food problem to be resolved, Lu Chengfeng is extremely excited and intends to come over and see for himself what is going on. As a result, who would have thought that in the end, he only got a handful of seeds? Or the unusual-looking wheat seeds. If this kind of seed really absorbs flesh and blood and grows rapidly, why didn't I get any news before? As everyone knows, the dawning refuge has not yet reached the shortage of food at all. Most of these mutant wheats are used for storage, and naturally there is no news. The more he thought about it, the more angry he became, and Lu Chengfeng couldn't help but get angry. Taking a deep breath, Lu Chengfeng sneered. Originally today, I was going to organize a team to go out to collect ingredients. However, since you said so, then I will give you a chance. If you can prove what you said, I, Lu Chengfeng, will kneel down and apologize to you. Having said this, Lu Chengfeng looked serious and looked at Guanhong. I didn't mean to embarrass you, but it will take time to validate the seed crop thing. I hope that when someone complains, you can take this responsibility. Guanhong nodded when he heard the words, his expression still firm. Okay, if something goes wrong, I'll be responsible for explaining it to everyone. After being guaranteed, Lu Chengfeng didn't say much. Taking a deep look at Linen, Lu Chengfeng sneered. Young people, sometimes it is not a good thing to be quick for quick success. On the contrary, it may screw up the situation that has been achieved with great difficulty. Today I'm going to teach you a good lesson to let you know that this kind of big talk can't be said casually without thinking about it. Plants that mature in one day. Not even an evolutionary could do such a thing. Lin was non-committal. Anne is not surprised by the doubts of these people. After all, a person's understanding of the world and the things around them depends entirely on past experience and external knowledge. These people in this Qianlong Research Institute and those who are raising the bar themselves are all research-oriented talents of the institute. People like this have far more self-awareness and self-confidence than ordinary people. Lin knew that as long as these people saw it with their own eyes, things would naturally change. Just thinking about it, Lu Chengfeng has already taken the seeds from Guanhong and strode to the experimental field in the Qianlong refuge. Naturally, they have long thought about how to grow food, but there is no way to do it. Just farming on a large scale. Others followed suit. In the stands, some onlookers met each other and discussed in a low voice. You say, is what that guy said true? Is there really any crop seeds in this world that can absorb flesh and blood to accelerate growth? How is this possible? Plant seeds grow through photosynthesis. Yeah, besides, in reality, apart from pitcher plants and a few insect-eating plants, which plants have you seen that eat cattle and sheep? That's true. Whether you believe it or not, I don't believe it anyway. The Minister of Logistics is a difficult role, and now that the top management of other research institutes is making a fuss here, I'm afraid things won't end so easily. Let's go over and take a look. This time is really exciting. I didn't expect that there will be a second scene after the first scene. Everyone in the stand said, and followed in twos and threes. After a while, only Lin and the people around were left in the entire open space. Guanhong glanced around, shook his head, and sighed. At this time, Lu Yao and several other girls also came to Lin and side. Looking at Lin, Lu Yao waved her small fist, her face full of anger. Lin, you must teach them a good lesson this time. That guy's words just now are so stinky, I can't stand it anymore. I really don't understand how you can hold back. Okay, Lu Yao. Zhang Qingshui sighed and patted Lu Yao's back. They'll see the truth anyway, you're sulking here and you're only hurting yourself. Yes. Lu Yao's eyes lit up, and then there was a little expectation on his face. I really want to see what these people will look like when they see the reality. Let's not wait here, let's go and have a look together. Speaking of which, Lu Yao walked forward first. After a while, under the leadership of Guanhong, everyone walked to a special room that was closed and almost surrounded by glass. Guanhong reached out and opened the door, and a ray of sunlight penetrated into his eyes. Under the treated transparent ceiling, the sunlight is dispersed into a soft light that is not harsh. The surroundings of the experimental field were illuminated by the light, and no shadow could be seen. The experimental field was neatly divided into 9 by 9 squares. Most of these blocks are already planted with various crops. Seeing the environment in the test field, Lu Yao couldn't help exclaiming. My God, this place is so beautiful, Guanhong smiled. Before this experimental field, we also considered using the genes of mutant animals or zombies to try to improve the original plants. The skylight above our head not only transmits light, allowing plants to perform photosynthesis smoothly, but also functions as a solar panel. Now it's completely self-sufficient with solar power and doesn't require additional power. Speaking, Guanhong pointed to a few blocks in front of him and explained aloud. All the seeds that can be collected by the current research have been planted in the experimental field in front of you. We have improved the plants here many times through grafting and transgenics. It's just that, so far, we haven't found a plant that can theoretically meet the physical needs of everyone in the institute. Lin nodded and said, you have worked hard. Now everyone is at the edge of the Qianlong refuge. Moreover, the experimental field in front of me has been carefully maintained by humans, both in terms of lighting and the operation of equipment. It is not difficult for Lin to imagine how much effort these people have made to solve the food problem. As he was thinking about it, Lu Yao, beside Lin, suddenly coughed a little strangely. Why don't those people come over to talk sarcastically? Is it because they are tired of talking? Hearing this, Lin turned his head and saw that not far away, at the dam of an experimental field, the people who had arrived earlier were gathered around and motionless. Seeing this, Guanhong was also a little curious. What happened? Mr. Lin, let's go over and have a look. Said that Guanhong should go first. Approaching the crowd, Lin immediately heard a whisper of discussion. No, there are actually plants in this world that can eat flesh and blood. This thing looks terrifying, just like any sci-fi movie I've seen before. Look, he's grown taller again. In the crowd, no one exclaimed. When everyone saw it, they were amazed. In the crowd, Lu Chengfeng's expression was extremely excited. The clenched fists also trembled slightly. Without waiting for others to speak, Lu Chengfeng suddenly straightened his waist and turned around. Seeing Lin In, Lu Chengfeng was stunned for a moment, then his expression became more excited and strode towards Lin In. Seeing Lu Chengfeng approaching, Lu Yao instinctively became a little wary. However, unexpectedly, Lu Chengfeng suddenly grabbed Lin An's hands, and his tone was full of gratitude. "I'm sorry, Mr. Lin, I'm the one who blamed you." As soon as the voice fell, a group of senior research institute executives couldn't help but look sideways. Suddenly, one person looked resentful and shouted, "Lao Lu, what's the matter with you? Didn't you still question him just now? Why did you suddenly change your tune now?" "I always speak with facts." Lu Chengfeng frowned, his expression a little dissatisfied. Judging from the growth of this plant, he can indeed absorb flesh and blood for transformation. You have also seen this growth rate. If nothing else, he can indeed complete the growth cycle in one day, as Mr. Lin said. But so what? Another person was a little dissatisfied. Now it's just confirmed that this plant can grow, not that he really has what this guy said. As long as it grows, it can satisfy 10,000 people. A day's ration. You are so impulsive without seeing the result now. If the result is not as expected, it is not a slap in the face of yourself. Even if the harvest is not as expected, it is enough for me. Lu Chengfeng said decisively. As long as there is this seed, I believe that the food problem of Qianlong Research Institute can be solved. As the Minister of Logistics, Lu Chengfeng has come to this experimental field more often than the researchers who specialize in research here. Therefore, with the accumulated experience, Lu Chengfeng can clearly judge. With the growth rate of this seed and the conversion efficiency of flesh and blood, even if his harvest is just like ordinary wheat, the conversion rate of its output is sufficient for the ration needs of everyone in the research institute. As long as the planting range can be expanded, after a month, the hidden dangers of food may be completely solved. Just correspondingly, eat less meat. Thinking of this, Chengfeng Lu's expression changed, and another thought appeared in his mind. With a little hope on his face, Lu Chengfeng stared at Lin and said cautiously, "Mr. Lin, I would like to ask you, if these plants do not absorb food that can be eaten by humans, but instead absorb the flesh and blood of zombies, then their results will be the same." Lin nodded lightly. "Not bad." As soon as these words came out, Chengfeng Lu's whole face suddenly flushed red from overexcited. "Also, won't it absorb zombie poison?" "Of course." Lin nodded. Lu Chengfeng struggled for a moment, but he was actually in front of Lin. As soon as his knees softened, he was about to kneel down. Lin just supported him. Lu Chengfeng couldn't kneel down, his face flushed. "I'm sorry, it was me before, the pressure was too much, and I was too calm." "It doesn't matter." Lin just circled around quietly, and for the first time, his tone became a little bit hotter. "I know there are a lot of problems inside your shelter. But, I hope this is the last time. Doubt me? Yes, but wait until I fail. Before that, if anyone else uses me as an excuse for some other reason." He narrowed his eyes. "I'd be angry too." After a moment of silence, "It's great, it's really great." Lu Chengfeng was so excited that he burst into tears and was the first to break the silence. As the head of the logistics department of the entire Qianlong Research Institute, Lu Chengfeng didn't know how much energy he had spent trying to find enough food sources. Every time I heard that the backbone of the Qianlong Research Institute was caught in the search for food, it was on the spot. This bad news is like a heavy hammer on Lu Chengfeng's chest. Dull. Repressed. But today, the young man who looked young in front of him actually proved to himself with practical actions that he could really solve the food problem of Qianlong Research Institute. Not only that, with the production speed of this plant, even if you don't go out to find flesh and blood, the output of these plants is enough to consume the entire Qianlong Research Institute. Even, there is a surplus. This person is really the savior of Qianlong Research Institute. Recalling his actions just now, Lu Chengfeng felt more and more apologetic. At this time, behind Lin, Lu Yao said with a smile, "How's it going? Now I know I'm so wrong. Is Lin amazing?" "You're right." Lu Chengfeng nodded his head with a guilty expression. "I really didn't expect that there would be such a crop in this world. This return to Qianlong Research Institute's food problem is completely solved. I didn't have to go out looking for food sources for a long time after that. As soon as these words came out, the audience was in an uproar. These people stayed in the Qianlong Research Institute for a long time. They are very clear about the situation inside the institute. Among the Qianlong Research Institutes, the worst casualty was going out to find food. Not only that, frequent dispatches will also attract the attention of the corpse tide, thus impacting the research institute. When the biochemical crisis first came, everyone was inexperienced in searching for food, which led to a corpse tide. Some people remembered the scene at that time, and couldn't help shivering fiercely, with a look of fear on their faces. Realizing the importance of it, the eyes of everyone looking at Lin became a little different. In the silence, a man with a deep scar on his face strode up to Lin. Looking at Lin, the man nodded lightly. "Mr. Lin, all of us owe you a life. I took the initiative to provoke the people I worked with before and apologize to you." Lin saw that the man in front of him was strong and powerful, and his body was extremely strong, and he thought that this man was not an ordinary person. Turning to look at Guan Hong, he listened to Guan Hong's light voice. "He's the Minister of Defense. It is also the evolutionary with the strongest combat power in the Qianlong Research Institute." Lin looked back and nodded slightly to the man. "Can we discuss the relocation now? I was so excited just now that I forgot about it." Lu Chengfeng slapped his forehead with a smile on his face. "I have no objection to Mr. Lin's desire to relocate," Lu Chengfeng said, looking at Zhang Yang and others. "What about you?" There were also executives in the crowd who were dissatisfied. "Even if you solve the food problem of Qianlong Research Institute, we will not go with you." "Not force." Lin's expression was calm. "I didn't plan to bring anyone with resistance ideas from the beginning. Although this time the purpose of coming here is to seek talents to let them enter their own Dawn Sanctuary. However, if the minds of the incoming talents are different from their own, then it is very likely that unforeseen crises and troubles will occur in the future. Therefore, from the beginning to the end, Lin never considered letting those who were extremely resistant to joining go to the Dawning Sanctuary." On the other hand, when he heard Lin's words, Zhang Yang, who had been silent for a while, suddenly raised his head. Lin saw that the expression on his face was a little struggling. However, Zhang Yang hesitated for a long time, but still didn't say anything. Clap clap. "Okay, everyone." Guan Hong suddenly clapped his palms. "Anyway, since Mr. Lin helped us solve the biggest trouble in the Qianlong Research Institute, then next, we should also reciprocate. And don't worry, after the equipment is shipped to the Dawning Shelter, we will be able to get feedback soon. It's up to me to supervise this." Listening to Guan Hong's words, those who were opposed to it before were unwilling to say anything more. Guan Hong is an existence recognized by everyone in the entire Qianlong Research Institute. In addition to his super ability and charisma, everyone knows one thing very well. That is, what Guan Hong promised will definitely be done. Seeing that Lin did not force them to move, Guan Hong made another promise. Opponents present also did not want to linger. With a light snort, after taking a deep look at Lin, a group of people left in twos and threes. After a while, most of the people with less guilt were cultivated. Seeing this scene, Guan Hong turned his head to look at Lin with a hint of apology on his face. "I'm really sorry, the number of people who can move this time may be much less than expected." Lin shook his head. "It's okay, take me to see the transport plane, there are still some preparations to do." The other side. Common room. A dozen young people gathered together with excited expressions. "Ha ha ha, I didn't expect that Mr. Lin would solve the food problem for our Qianlong Research Institute. Although it is correct to say that it has been solved, in the future, our meat grading should be less. Yeah, maybe after a while, we can only have pancakes every day. Something is better than nothing, right? Yes, have you forgotten that at the beginning, we were forced to hide in the Qianlong Research Institute to defend against the corpse tide, and we could only drink that kind of porridge like clear soup every day. Don't mention it, my goosebumps are about to rise." Just as he was talking, several more people walked into the common room. Seeing a group of people gathered together, the people who came in were a little strange. "What are you talking about there? Did something big happen?" Hearing the question, the people who were discussing turned their heads to look, and then a smile appeared on their faces. "Ha ha ha, hurry up and thank Mr. Lin. You shouldn't have to go out often to find supplies in the future. Ha ha ha, I think all the people in the Ministry of Defense should set up a longevity tablet for Mr. Lin." Several evolutionaries of the Ministry of Defense listened with dazed faces. Seeing a few people still looked puzzled, someone stepped forward to explain it to them. After a while, there was an exclamation in the common room. Damn it, is it true or false? Do we really need to go out? A group of people from the Ministry of Defense had their eyes straight and their mouths slightly open. Compared with other members of the Qianlong Research Institute, these people are more aware of the meaning of this sentence and the weight contained in it. A group of people matched face to face. After a while, one of them frowned and his expression became serious. This kind of things can't be joked casually. You're not lying to me, are you? I lied to you. The person who spoke earlier raised his voice. So many people followed to see it, and even the Minister of Logistics has personally admitted the fact. How could I lie to you? At this point, everyone in the security department finally confirmed that what the other party said was the truth. The next moment, the faces of everyone in the security department showed unconcealed excitement. Ha ha ha, don't we finally have to go out and fight to the death? This is really great news. Where is that Mr. Lin now? I'm going to thank him in person. A group of people shouted and left the common room. The other side. Workshop. Lin walked into the workshop under the leadership of the workshop manager of Qianlong Research Institute. Ding ding ding. Before getting close, the clanging sound of the power hammer hitting the metal came into the ear. On the other hand, the workshop manager had a smile on his face. Mr. Lin, this is one of the most important places in the Qianlong Research Institute. We will process and transform the parts we manufacture or collect from outside. It can be said that this place is as important as the experimental field. Lin nodded and looked around. The whole workshop was filled with a strong smell of oil. The walls are all paved with metal and no paint is used. Overall, the workshop gives a steampunk feel. Aware of Lin's arrival, a mechanic glanced up, then set his eyes on the workshop manager. What, Luo Fu, have you brought the leader to inspect? The man greeted with a smile. Luo Fu laughed. Mr. Lin wants to see the transport plane. I'm just responsible for leading the way. The man was a little suspicious. Glancing at Lin, the man nodded and said no more. Following Luo Fu into the depths of the workshop, the surrounding space gradually became wider. Before he could get close, Lin suddenly heard a slightly stern voice. How can you get things done right now? You have repaired the cylinder of an internal combustion engine for a week and you still can't repair it. Do you still want to do it? Following the voice, Lin saw a strong man in overalls reprimanding the two youths who bowed their heads in front of him. Although he couldn't see the man's face clearly, the man's tight t-shirt and well-defined arms gave him an unknown sense of security. On one side, Luo Fu stopped and said in a low voice with some fear. Mr. Lin, let's wait here first. Although Wang Chuan is usually a good person, but when he gets angry, it's not worth it. Let's wait until he's done talking. Okay. Lin nodded, not in a hurry, and looked around. The space of the entire workshop has been extremely open here. As far as the eye can see, it is empty. A white dotted line is also drawn in the middle of the ground painted with paint. It seems that this should be the place where the takeoff and landing runway is provided for transport aircraft. Lin thought to himself and glanced over his head. Sure enough, in the middle of the black dome, there is a middle line that is not easy to find. After a little difference, Lin confirmed that there is indeed a retractable dome. Luo Fu, why are you here? Hearing the sound, Lin looked back. Wang Chuan has already come over. The man in front of him had a long beard, and his eyes were small but piercing. At this time, although the tone was still calm, there was still a daunting aura between the lines. I'm here to show Mr. Lin the transport plane. Luo Fu shrank his neck, his expression a little scared. Brother Wang, look. Before he finished speaking, Wang Chuan waved his hand impatiently as if chasing flies. Busy, no time. Having said that, Wang Chuan set his eyes on Lin. Looking at Lin up and down, a little doubt appeared on his face. Wait, what do you want to see the transporter do? Also, I think you seem to be reborn, are you new? Luo Fu did not dare to delay, and quickly explained to Wang Chuan what had just happened. After Luo Fu finished speaking, Wang Chuan's expression softened a little. Nodding to Lin, Wang Chuan said, the food supply of the Qianlong Research Institute is indeed a long-standing problem. I didn't expect you to be able to do this at such a young age. Speaking, Wang Chuan waved his hand. Come with me, the transport plane is not here. With that said, Wang Chuan strode forward. Follow Wang Chuan to a side door. When the door opened, another huge space came into view. In the middle of the field, a huge transport plane came into view. The transport plane is silver gray, with two huge engines on the left and right sides of the wings. Lin took a rough look and couldn't help but feel a little surprised. The transport plane seems to be bigger than Antonov. Hearing Lin's words, Wang Chuan turned his head with surprise in his eyes. I didn't expect that you also have an understanding of machinery. After saying that, Wang Chuan nodded, showing a little pride on his face. Before this, the Antonov made by Mauzy was indeed the largest in the world and had the strongest carrying capacity. But not now. The Hercules I modified is the largest transport aircraft in the world today. On one side, Luo Fu explained in a low voice. Mr. Lin, don't look at Wang Chuan, he looks like an informal reckless man. But he is a real top research talent from NASA. Before the end of the world, he presided over many related aerospace projects. Looking at the world, there are not many who can be as famous as him. Having said this, the expression on Luo Fu's face was somewhat proud. The plane was supposed to be the wreckage of a crash that we found nearby. At first everyone thought it was impossible to assemble the plane. Who would have thought that Wang Chuan would have relied on his own strength to forcibly transform this transport plane into what it is now? Hearing Luo Fu's praise, Wang Chuan was a little proud. Pretending to be reserved, Wang Chuan waved his hand and pretended not to care. Actually, it's nothing, but it's just a matter of changing the plane. Luo Fu smiled awkwardly and changed the subject. Boss Wang, Mr. Lin is in a hurry, let's hurry up and take a look at the transport plane. Alright. Wang Chuan laughed loudly. Come with me. Follow Wang Chuan into the cabin. Wang Chuan pointed to a break in the cabin and said aloud. When I went to the periphery to search for supplies last week, I accidentally encountered some mutated flocks of birds, which ended up tearing a hole here. I'm afraid you'll have to wait a while if you're going to ship a large shipment. Speaking of this, Wang Chuan couldn't help but raise his chin slightly. Lin glanced at Wang Chuan, and there was no wave in his heart. Whether it was the first contact just now, or introducing myself to the transport aircraft now. Even without mind reading, Lin could detect a considerable degree of confidence in this person. At this moment, seeing his a little smug and proud look, Lin knew that he was waiting for him to praise him. However, Lin did not intend to do so. The space for this transport plane is enough, but the configuration is too poor. Lin shook his head and said, let me take over the repair and modification. Medium. What? Wang Chuan's face froze, and then he looked at Lin with a bit more gloom in his eyes. I can't see it, but I have met a colleague, Wang Chuan said indifferently. On the one hand, Luo Fu's expression became a little frightened, and he took 2 steps to the side quietly. As long as you have stayed in the Qianlong Research Institute for a period of time, and have dealt with the workshop, you will know. Wang Chuan has always been soft and not hard. No matter how big the matter is, as long as he speaks softly and asks for each other, Wang Chuan will basically agree. However, if you are straightforward, even if it is a trivial matter, it may be suppressed and not allowed to pass. It's miserable. Mr. Lin speaks so aggressively, this boss Wang's stubborn temper will definitely come up again. Luo Fu complained in his heart. Sure enough, the next moment, Wang Chuan's eyes widened, and he said with a smile. Tell me, how do you want to refit with? Is there anything I can do to help? No, I can do it alone, Lin said casually. In order to meet the transportation requirements in his mind as soon as possible, Lin intends to directly use the enhanced functions to improve the transportation aircraft and make it meet the requirements for use. At the same time, Lin knew very well that the process of strengthening himself would be too bizarre. Right now, in the Qianlong Research Institute, there are mixed fish and dragons, so these functional abilities are best kept secret if they can be kept secret. After all, the tree attracts the wind. Lin doesn't want to waste time dealing with useless troubles. And, even if these people stay by their side, it won't help much. Lin also has no interest in showing a hand in front of these people and seeing their adoring expressions. Wang Chuan didn't know what Lin was thinking. Hearing Lin's direct rejection, Wang Chuan's face changed. Frowning, Wang Chuan took a deep breath and said coldly. Then please do it yourself. Wait a minute, Lin said aloud. What's the matter? Wang Chuan said angrily. Could it be that you regretted it? If so, you are too fickle. Please remove all the people. Lin's expression was calm. I don't like to be disturbed when I work. Are you crazy? Wang Chuan was stunned. Not to mention a large transport aircraft, even if it is an ordinary small helicopter, it requires at least 7 or 8 people to cooperate in disassembly and assembly. What's more, the transport plane in front of you can be said to be the most powerful and largest transport plane in the world at present. There are more than 200 skilled workers in the workshop. Plus there are nearly 8,000 apprentices. Even so, Wang Chuan still felt overwhelmed when he was maintaining the transport plane. However, the young man in front of him, who seemed to have just entered the society for a few years, actually said that he didn't want anyone. What the hell is this guy thinking? Wang Chuan frowned, puzzled. Although there are many crazy people in the last days, those crazy people do not mean that their IQ is not enough, is a fool. From Luo Fu's attitude, Wang Chuan can easily see that Lin must have done something to arouse Luo Fu's reverence. And such a person is even less likely to be a guy whose brain is kicked by a donkey. Thinking of this, Wang Chuan took a deep breath, frowned and said coldly. Okay, since you asked me to do it, but I can say the ugly things up front. Later, if you feel that you need help, don't blame me for scolding you. After speaking, without waiting for Lin to answer, Wang Chuan greeted him and turned around and left with everyone in the workshop. After a while, the workshop was dead silent. On one side, Luo Fu looked left and right, the expression on his face was a little embarrassing. Mr. Lin, look at this. You go out too, Lin said lightly. What? Luo Fu was stunned, but quickly recovered. Nodding lightly, Luo Fu turned to leave. Confirming that there was no one else in the workshop, Lin stretched out his hand and pressed it on the inner cabin bulkhead of the transport plane. With a thought in his heart, an invisible force came from his body. This force poured into the transport plane like water irrigating the land, and then spread out, wandering around everywhere. At the same time, Lin's mind slowly came up with a diagram of a transportation mechanism like a drawing software. In Lin's view, the current transport aircraft is not very powerful except for the damaged position. At the same time, because the Dawning Research Institute does not have such a wide runway as the Qianlong Research Institute. Therefore, the takeoff and landing method of large transport aircraft also needs to be improved. I have an idea in my heart, and the invisible force integrated into the transport aircraft also responds. The next moment, I saw these forces attached to the aircraft engine. Subsequently, the engine's mechanical gears and other components entered as if they had their own will, and began to move and deform on their own, and then reassembled. Crack. Crack. The sound of metal rubbing is incessant. But unexpectedly, not harsh. On the contrary, the sound seems to have a certain rhythm, with a mechanical harmony of beauty. When the various parts are reassembled, the entire transporter looks brand new. Taking a look at the very sci-fi engines on both sides of the wing, Lin nodded with satisfaction. Stepping into the cockpit, Lin looked at the various instrument panels thoughtfully. Solved the engine and structural strength issues of the transport aircraft. All that's left is to install an easy-to-use autopilot in the cab. The voyage of large transport aircraft is very long, and the driver in the cockpit needs to sit for a long time in the driver's seat for a long time, with the help of radar and the naked eye to check the situation ahead. Before the end of the world, it's better to say. After all, after reaching the stratosphere, you can turn on the automatic cruise function and fly forward mechanically. But now is the end of the world, not only the danger of zombies, but even flying animals have undergone a large number of mutations. In this case, if the driver is kept in a state of high concentration throughout the whole process, it is difficult to guarantee that there will be no accidents. Therefore, an artificial intelligence navigation that can replace human beings to perform most of the lines of intelligent operations is necessary. With an idea in mind, the strange power spreads again. Only the various instrument panels in front of me kept having buttons falling off. At the same time, the remaining parts are merged in turn. After a while, the entire cockpit also changed its appearance. After doing this, Lin checked it carefully and fixed some minor flaws and small problems in the transporter. After confirming that the reinforcement was completed, Lin let out a long breath. Finished. With that said, Lin turned around and walked out of the wooden transporter. At the same time, it's so damn it. Wang Chuan smashed half a bottle of beer on the table. The hops splashed everywhere, and everyone avoided it. Boss Wang, what made you look like this? The person who was resting on the side asked with a smile. Wang Chuan snorted, his expression a little dissatisfied. I really don't know where you got a grandpa from. It doesn't matter if it depends on the transport plane, but even a layman instructs an expert, saying that he has to do it himself. When everyone heard it, they became interested, and they all came to Wang Chuan's side. Boss Wang, tell me who is so powerful. Ha ha ha, I always thought that in the workshop, no one dared to say one, but I didn't expect a thorn to come today. Wang Chuan snorted lightly, took a sip of beer, and said aloud. That guy seems to be called Linen. As soon as these words came out, the expressions of the people who were still smiling suddenly became embarrassed. A group of people looked at each other, and couldn't help but hesitate. Wang Chuan was even more strange when he saw this. Whether it is the former Luofu or the people in the lounge now. If it is normal, when they hear such exaggerated and bizarre things, these people will definitely laugh at them immediately. But at this time, looking at the expressions of these people, Wang Chuan suddenly had a feeling that these people seemed to think that Linen had the possibility of being able to do these things. The moment this idea came into his mind, Wang Chuan couldn't help but feel a little absurd. However, the reactions of these people also caused Wang Chuan's doubts. Reaching out to pat the nearest person, Wang Chuan asked aloud. Then what is Linan's background? Why do you all have this expression? When asked about that person who knew Wang Chuan's temper, he didn't dare to go around in circles, so he recounted what happened before. Wang Chuan couldn't help being a little surprised when he heard the man speak. I seem to be a little bit of that little Joe guy. Just thinking about it, a member of the Defense Department had a sincere expression. Boss Wang, Mr. Lin can be regarded as our savior to some extent. Otherwise, for our sake, don't conflict with Mr. Lin after a while. When Wang Chuan heard this, Ben's somewhat withdrawn heart became angry again. With a light snort, Wang Chuan stood up and said loudly. I've never seen anyone who can repair an entire transport plane by one person since I was a child. Today I want to see if that Linen has the ability to repair the transport plane. Having said that, Wang Chuan's expression changed and he looked towards the entrance. With a slightly mocking smile on his face, Wang Chuan said with a yin and yang strange air. What's the matter? Master Repairman, why did you come back so quickly? Can't the transporter be repaired? It's been repaired. Linen said calmly, come and inform Xiao Wu that the instrument can be assembled. What? The crowd could not help but stare at him. Have you finished remodeling? Wang Chuan was stunned for a moment, and then he didn't believe it. Are you building blocks when building a transport plane? It's only been so long, and you actually said that you've finished repairing. You can see for yourself. Linen replied. HMPH, just look at it. Wang Chuan stood up and walked out of the common room. When the rest of the people saw this, they were also a little curious and followed. After a while, Wang Chuan pushed the small door on the side of the workshop and walked in. The moment he saw the transport plane, Wang Chuan's eyes widened in disbelief. The shape of the transport aircraft has not changed much though. However, Wang Chuan keenly found that the outer welding part of the entire transport plane, together with the crack he had seen before, disappeared. Not only that, but the four engines of the transport aircraft have also undergone tremendous changes in shape. The turbine was no longer facing straight to the rear, but at a 75-degree angle to the ground. Just at a glance, the full sense of technology made the blood of the people present swell. How is this possible? How did he do it? Wang Chuan was dumbfounded. The expressions on his face changed one after another, and Wang Chuan ran to the vicinity without saying a word. Reaching out and stroking the engine, Wang Chuan was a little absent-minded and muttered to himself. Could this transport plane be able to take off and land in place? Speaking of this, Wang Chuan shook his head and said firmly, this is absolutely impossible. With the development of science and technology in today's world, it is not very difficult to make flying vehicles take off and land in place. After all, so many satellites have been sent to the sky. However, in Wang Chuan's opinion, it is a fool's errand to make a large transport plane take off and land on the spot. If nothing else, the fuel issue alone is enough of a headache. Could it be that this guy deliberately made this kind of rectification in order to save face for himself, and ended up scrapping the transport plane? As soon as this idea appeared, Wang Chuan immediately denied himself. The shape of the transport aircraft in front of him has been completely different. And even the welded seams on the surface are completely invisible. How can someone who can use such a technology make a fake to fool people? Could it be that this transport plane can really take off and land on the spot? Once the thoughts in the heart germinate, they are hard to stop. Wang Chuan swallowed nervously, his voice trembling slightly. This transport, can I have a test flight? Yes. Lin An nodded. Hearing Lin An's permission, Wang Chuan couldn't wait to hurry up. Pushing open the cockpit door, Wang Chuan took another breath. Buttons throughout the cockpit. several times less than before. Just a casual glance, Wang Chuan found that the layout of these buttons is almost the same as before. Sitting nervously in the main driver's seat, Wang Chuan instinctively wanted to start turbocharging. It's just that Wang Chuan was a little worried when he put his hand on the button. The machine in front of me is so convenient that even the co-pilot can control it without sitting. Now I'm so excited. What if I make a mistake because I'm not familiar with the system? If there is a problem with such a good scientific and technological crystallization, I am afraid that I will not be able to raise my head in the research institute. Just as he was hesitating, the LCD screen on one side suddenly lit up. The driver is welcome to operate this transport aircraft. Do you need a novice tutorial? Tutorial for beginners. Wang Chuan was stunned for a moment, points of knowledge, and confirmed. Subsequently, a series of text and operation methods appeared on the LCD screen. The more Wang Chuan looked, the more shocked he became. It takes years or more for a top driver to develop success. Not only need to memorize a large number of button layouts and corresponding functions, but also learn other related theoretical knowledge. But now, this cockpit operation method is simply omitted to the extreme. Obviously, the anti-lock part is all replaced by the artificial intelligence in the LCD screen. In the vernacular, even playing a realistic game is much more difficult than the operation in front of you. It's amazing, it's really amazing. Wang Chuan was fascinated by the sight. His hand hovered on the joystick several times, and finally did not choose to start. Taking a deep breath, Wang Chuan stood up from his seat. Walking out of the cockpit, everyone who was watching at the door came over. Did the engine not start? I just said, how could there be a transport plane that can go up and down in this world? Listening to the discussion in front of everyone, Wang Chuan smiled bitterly. Such epic-making technology is simply incredible. I hesitated for a long time and didn't dare to operate it. However, I believe that this transport aircraft should be able to take off and land vertically. When everyone heard the words, there was an uproar. How is this possible? Lin just smiled. How do you understand? What is black technology? As the most important technical talent of Qianlong Research Institute, Wang Chuan's words, to these people, are like mountains and cannot be shaken. At this time, Wang Chuan affirmed the transport plane, and a group of people could only accept the facts in front of them. Wang Chuan ignored others, with a slightly frenzied expression on his face. Mr. Lin, you are really amazing, Wang Chuan said, and turned to look. However, he found that Lin was no longer in his original position. Wang Chuan was startled and a little anxious. Where did Mr. Lin go? The onlookers who were standing beside Lin before looked at each other. Soon, one person said carefully, I heard Mr. Lin say that he seems to be preparing to move the equipment and take away the relevant personnel. Now it's time to find Guan Hong. When Wang Chuan heard this, without any hesitation, he pushed aside the crowd and strode out. The other side. After leaving the workshop, Lin, relying on his previous memories, found the experimental field in no time. At this time, Guan Hong was discussing the issue of crops in the experimental field with Lu Chengfeng and others. Hearing the sound, Guan Hong looked up, a smile on his face. Mr. Lin, are you finished watching the workshop? How does it feel? Lin nodded. The transport plane is a bit rudimentary, but it's barely enough. While Lin was talking, Wang Chuan, who was chasing into the experimental field, just heard Lin's words in his ears. With a slight twitch in his heart, Wang Chuan's eyelids jumped. No matter what means Lin used, he transformed the transport plane. Just talking about the technical content of the entire transport aircraft is not something that ordinary people can do. However, in the eyes of Lin, it is already a top-level product, but it is still too rudimentary in Lin's eyes. Could it be, if the conditions are sufficient, he can make a more advanced transport plane? As soon as this thought arose, Wang Chuan could no longer contain his excitement. Walking quickly to Lin's side, Wang Chuan shouted, Mr. Lin, please take me with you. At this time, in the corner of the test field, there were some high-level leaders who had opposed Lin before discussing something there. Hearing the shouting, one of them turned to look. His eyes fell on Lin, and that person's expression instantly became ugly. The rest of the people also found the abnormality, turned their heads and looked, and their expressions changed. Wang Chuan ignored others and walked up to Lin to look at himself, his eyes full of admiration for Lin. Mr. Lin, I apologize to you for my previous aggressive attitude. I really never thought that there would be a genius like you in this world. Please let me learn with you. Lin En didn't answer. Glancing at Wang Chuan, Lin En took the board from Guan Hong's hand. Sign up first. What? Wang Chuan was stunned for a moment, and immediately realized what was going on. Without any hesitation, Wang Chuan took the pen and paper, swiped the pen on the top, and wrote his name. Lin En retracted the notepad and turned to look at Guan Hong. Help me see who of the Qianlong Research Institute are willing to leave. Of course, this is all voluntary. As the director of the Dawning Research Institute, Lin En only needs like-minded people who can focus on his own side and use his strength in one place. As for those opponents in the Qianlong Research Institute, Lin En never considered letting them leave with him from the very beginning. It's just that among these people, they have to be screened carefully with mind-reading techniques, so as not to infiltrate those with ulterior motives. Lin En thought, Guan Hong has already made some moves. He took the walkie-talkie and said a few words inside, and the experimental field was overcrowded without 10 minutes of time. Ma Ji was among the crowd. Through the hustle and bustle of people's heads, Ma Ji's eyes fell on the man who was surrounded by a flat and cold expression like a machine. There was an inexplicable smile on the corner of his mouth, and he thought to himself. This Lin En is now rumored in the Qianlong Research Institute. Just this time, I took this opportunity to join him in the Dawn Refuge. The so-called back to the big tree is good to enjoy the shade. If the luck is better, maybe I can be a high-level dang-dang. Before the thought dissipated, Ma Ji suddenly found that Lin En's eyes fell on him at some point. Surprised, Ma Ji didn't dare to look at Lin En. Did he notice me? Ma Ji's heart jumped fiercely, then looked at Lin En, and squeezed out a very ugly smile. Lin En ignored Ma Ji and looked elsewhere. Seeing this scene, Ma Ji was not annoyed, but shrugged as usual. Bang bang bang. At this time, a crisp applause attracted everyone's attention. On one side, Guan Hong applauded lightly and said at the same time. Everyone, those who want to go to the Dawning Research Institute, please queue up to register, and the review link will follow. Hearing the words, everyone was very conscious and lined up in a row. Lin En is holding a notepad. Prepare to start registering for everyone in front of you. A group of people lined up with excited expressions and whispered discussions. I didn't expect it. People from our research department actually came over. Ha ha ha, it was amazing to hear about Mr. Lin's deeds just now. This existence is like a god, and I adore him so much. Yeah, I followed to the workshop just now. The shape of this transport plane really made me look stupid. Not only our little staff, but even a master of technology like Wang Chuan was shocked by Mr. Lin. No way. Wang Chuan is notorious for his temper better than his skills, and making him bow his head is not something that can be achieved by a little bit of crushing. Who said no? That's why Mr. Lin is really a show. Shish, stop talking, start registering. During the registration process, Lin and Hour will also randomly select a few people to ask innocuous questions. Only then, some people passed, and some people were directly rejected by Lin En on the spot. Seeing that someone was eliminated on the spot, Ma Ji was nervous. When he was in a trance, he had already walked up to Lin En. Lin En held a pen and paper in his hand and took a deep look at Ma Ji. After a moment of silence, Lin En narrowed his eyes and shook his head gently. Sorry, you don't meet my standards. His eyes were incomparably deep, as if he had penetrated all the thoughts in Ma Ji's heart in an instant. Those sharp eyes seemed to see through everything. The hunch in his heart was fulfilled, and Ma Ji became anxious. After listening to all kinds of magical rumors, and seeing the miracle of the transport plane with his own eyes, Ma Ji can be absolutely certain at this time. This guy in front of him has no other qualities besides being handsome, is a big guy who hides deeply. Seeing that the thigh of the hand was about to be held up, Ma Ji was also a little anxious. Mr. Lin, why is this? Am I unqualified? Xiao Wu's expression was sincere. I sincerely want to join the Dawning Research Institute. Thank you, no need. Lin En shook his head. I'm here to find like-minded partners. I want to lean on the tree and steal chickens. I don't want them. Lin En's voice was not loud, but the venue was very quiet at this time, and Lin En's words were clearly heard by everyone. In the back row, a group of people couldn't help but secretly snickered. When Lin En broke his mind, Ma Ji's face changed again. Stuck on his neck and wanted to argue again, but the moment he met Lin En's eyes, Ma Ji suddenly felt guilty for some reason, turned his head away, didn't dare to say more, and walked away in despair. It took about 2 hours for Lin En to finally register the last person. In addition to Wang Chuan, The people who came to report this time also included Zhang Yang, the most powerful Qianlong Research Institute executive who had opposed it before. Zhang Yang took the initiative to show his favor, and Lin had some thoughts in his heart, thinking that he was just pretending temporarily. But after checking it through mind reading it this time, Lin was surprised to find that Zhang Yang turned out to be sincere. As for Zhang Yang's mental journey, Lin never found the context. Gently exhaling a turbid breath and placing the pen in his hand on the cardboard, Lin glanced at the name and nodded with satisfaction. Through Guan Hong's evaluation and help Lin, he found that he had taken away nearly 70% of the talents in Qianlong Research Institute. Lin is very satisfied with this result. With these people, after returning to the Dawning Research Institute, the medicine can be put into mass production. Then, those evolutionaries can also be made like an assembly line. Taking back his thoughts, Lin handed the board to Guan Hong, who was standing beside him. Get ready to move the equipment. The tube gets the list very efficiently. In less than 2 days, Guan Hong removed all kinds of large-scale instruments, and then stuffed the instruments into the transporter in an assembly line. After 2 days of fermentation, Lin's reputation in the Qianlong Research Institute became more and more resounding. So that no matter where you go, you will be amazed and admired. For these people's fanaticism, Lin has no waves. Taking advantage of the gap in the transportation, I went up and down the Qianlong Research Institute again, and it was confirmed that there was nothing missing. Finally, in the evening, all the large instruments were transported. All kinds of talents who had been registered before were also stuffed into the transport cabin along with the instruments. Lin walked through the crowd to the cab. When the driver in the main driver's seat saw Lin coming in, he got up quickly and said respectfully, "Hello, Mr. Lin." Lin nodded. "Let's take off." The driver took a deep breath, restrained his excitement, and moved on the console in front of him. The driver is skilled, and it seems that he has studied it a lot in the past 2 days. Soon, with the roar of the turbine rotating, the huge Secretary Yuan left the ground very smoothly. In the corner of the workshop, a group of Qianlong Research Institute executives who had opposed Lin gathered together. The men's sleeves were blown away by the strong air currents that the transporter launched. Even the eyes can hardly be opened, it is worth using the hand. Even so, a group of people were still reluctant to turn their eyes, staring straight at the transport plane. The expressions on these people's faces were astonishing. How so? This transport plane can take off and land vertically. If we had this technology, we wouldn't have to spend so much manpower and material resources to convert the open-air runway into a liftable runway, which not only saves a lot of materials, but also saves a lot of space. A group of people said, the transport plane has slowly flew out of the open skylight above. Just as a group of senior officials of the Qianlong Research Institute wanted to sigh a few more words, the turbine of the transport plane turned to the rear. Boom. The flame-breathing engine disappeared from everyone's sight within a few seconds. A group of Qianlong Research Institute executives were dumbfounded again. Is this transporter a bug? How could there be such a rapid acceleration? What is that engine made of? This is too perverted. Among the group of people, there were a few high-level executives with a hint of remorse deep in their eyes. The other side. Inside the transporter cab. Lin pulled out a fixed stool from the spare cabin behind the driver's seat and sat down. Because of the rush, Lin did not set up windows for the cabin. Therefore, if you want to observe the movement of the entire transport aircraft, it can only be done through the glass directly in front of the cockpit. Glancing at the driver who was short of breath and had an excited expression, Lin just looked back when he suddenly heard a somewhat resentful voice coming from his side. "It's good, everyone admires you so much." Lin turned around and saw Liu Yao staring at him resentfully. The expression on his face softened, and Lin asked softly, "Aren't you going to rest?" "I slept too much at the Qianlong Research Institute in the past few days, and some couldn't sleep." Liu Yao shook his head, and also pulled up a fixed stool from the wall and leaned against Lin. Holding his chin in his hands, Liu Yao looked at the sky outside the glass and sighed softly. "When I'm bored these days, I also call Xiao Xiao to help them make some materials that are in short supply." "But why? Those people only saw that you modified the transport plane, but didn't find me and my little contribution." Lin knows that Liu Yao's heart is unbalanced. He shook his head slightly, trying to comfort him. Suddenly, Liu Yao's eyes flickered, and he pointed to the front and said in surprise, "Look at what is that?" Hearing the words, the driver in the main driver's seat looked forward subconsciously. "I saw a large black spot in the distant sky gathering rapidly." At the same time, a radar siren sounded from the cab. The voice was quick and sharp. In the cockpit, except for Lin, everyone's expressions became tense. What the hell is that? Liu Yao stared straight ahead. After looking carefully for a moment, Liu Yao exclaimed, "Oh, it's a flock of birds." While speaking, the black spot can already see the general appearance. I saw a group of birds that could not be identified as geese or crows, flapping their wings and rushing towards them and others. The feathers that cover the surface of these birds reflect a metallic glow in the sunlight. At the same time, a pair of pupils also reflected a dark red light. The driver's lips trembled and his face turned pale. No? Why are we so unlucky to encounter so many mutant birds? Although it is not clear what species these mutant birds are, and what specific methods are there. However, as a veteran driver in the Qianlong Research Institute, Wang Lu's driving experience in the apocalypse can be said to be rich. The last time he participated in a transport mission and was attacked by a flock of birds, Wang Lu had already seen the power of these flat-haired beasts. Moreover, the last attack was only a small-scale harassment. Even so, the transport plane was seriously injured and nearly crashed. The number of birds encountered this time is unknown. But at a glance, it was at least 5 times the size of the last attack. The expression on his face became more and more tense. Wang Lu turned his head and shouted to Lin. "Mr. Lin, in an emergency, please inform the people who can shoot and prepare to meet the enemy." Having said this, Wang Lu took a deep breath. Hopefully, we're lucky enough to get past these flocks. It doesn't need to be so troublesome. Lin whistled. Jin Yu, who took off with Lin above the sky, felt something in his heart and swooped down. Before the flock of birds approached, everyone in the cockpit saw a golden figure rushing straight into the flock of birds. Behind Jin Yu, there are countless falcons, or carnivorous birds such as owls. The flock of birds that had been aggressively rushing towards the transport plane suddenly became a mess. Countless birds, panicked, fled everywhere. After a while, the transport plane flew safely through the gap opened by Jin Yu. Phew. Wang Lu exhaled a turbid breath and wiped the sweat from his forehead. It scared me to death. I thought I was going to die here accidentally this time. Wang Lu said. Suddenly his expression changed. As early as in the Qianlong Research Institute, Wang Lu had heard that Lin seemed to have recruited a bird of prey covered in gold during the previous meeting. At that time, Wang Lu only thought that his colleagues were joking with him and didn't take it too seriously. After all, how in the world could there be any metamorphosis capable of controlling large mutant birds? He calmed down until now, recalling Lin An's whistle just now and what happened after that. Only then did Wang Lu realize that Lin could really summon golden falcons. Turning his head to look at Lin with a calm expression, Wang Lu had a look of admiration on his face. "Mr. Lin, you are really amazing. I didn't expect that you could even control such a mutant animal. Keep sailing, I have to deal with something." Lin turned to leave. After a while, the transport plane slowed down slowly and landed in an open space not far from the dawning refuge. Soon, the hatch opened, and everyone from the Qianlong Research Institute walked down from the transport plane. Looking left and right, the expressions on the faces of a group of people are somewhat novel. Is this the Dawn Sanctuary? Looks good. Looking at Mr. Lin's previous actions, it is not difficult to guess that this is the base camp of the elite. Wait, have you noticed that we didn't seem to land on the airport runway? In the crowd, Zhang Yang suddenly said something. Everyone was slightly taken aback. Turning around and looking around, the crowd was suddenly in an uproar. No way. There's really no runway. How did the transport plane land? Zhang Yang frowned and thought for a moment. Immediately, as if thinking of something, he couldn't believe it. This transport plane can land vertically. When the transport plane took off before, Zhang Yang did not feel the obvious pushback feeling that the transport plane had when it started. At that time, Zhang Yang thought it was Lin who transformed the internal structure of the transport plane, and did not take it to heart. It was not until this time that Zhang Yang understood after he stepped off the transport plane and noticed the surrounding situation. The fundamental reason for the lack of pushback feeling is because the transport plane did not accelerate to achieve the purpose of takeoff from the beginning to the end. As a scientific researcher, he is a senior executive of Qianlong Research Institute. It only took Zhang Yang an instant to understand the technical difficulty involved. Looking at Lin who stepped off the transport plane with a calm expression, Zhang Yang was shocked and excited. In a flamboyant point of view, at this time, Lin was no longer the stunned blue-headed man with a dead fish face when he first came to Qianlong Research Institute. He is a man who can truly control the fate of mankind and change the future of mankind. Clenching his fists, Zhang Yang made up his mind secretly. Be sure to do everything I can to develop Dawn Refuge. Maybe human beings will one day really be able to get rid of the current crisis under his leadership. Just as he was thinking about it, Zhang Yang suddenly heard Lin say, "Everyone, let's start setting up the equipment." Hearing Lin's words, everyone suddenly returned to their senses. Aware of the great potential that Dawning Refuge may have, a group of people got excited and moved. After a while, all kinds of huge instruments were removed from the transport plane. At the same time, Lin notified the personnel in the Dawning Refuge to come and assist. Looking at the huge instruments being carried down from the transport plane, the expressions of everyone in the Dawning Refuge were shocked. He actually did it. Regarding Lin's visit to Qianlong Research Institute this time, everyone who received the news hoped that Lin would be successful. However, everyone is very clear. If you want other shelters to take out their housekeeping things, the difficulty is not a single star. But, who would have thought, Lin not only did it. And at this time, looking at the expressions of admiration and reverence on the faces of the people who followed in the Qianlong Research Institute, it seemed that Lin had completely convinced these people. How on earth did he do it? Everyone in the Dawning Refuge looked puzzled. "Don't be dumbfounded, come and help quickly," Lin said. Hearing the sound, everyone came back to their senses and lifted their feet together to help carry it forward. 2 days later. City.